Horses hitting the track when it first opened this morning. Again, kind of a preference of certain trainers. Todd Pletcher, Chad Brown, trainers especially who have big stables of horses, start as soon as the track opens. That's about 5:30 this morning. Opry was first among them.
We're going to get the post positions as well. They were drawn yesterday, the Root and Riddle post position draw at EquestriCon at the Kentucky International Convention Center. As the show rolls forward as well, we'll take a look at all of those fields. Opry drew post position number 8. Good post for him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Caton, a big, good-looking son of Declaration at War, coming out of a fourth-place performance in the Pilgrim, a race in which he was the 8-5 favorite. And he was admittedly a little bit disappointing. He had a clear trip. He was simply fourth best that day, but he did look very good in the with anticipation. We're going to see a lot of these Todd Pletcher horses, a lot of the Chad Brown horses for the first time this morning here at Churchill.
And just a little jog at this point, and I imagine if it's his first day at the racetrack, it's very possible that that's all he's going to do. Sometimes an easy jog and then turned around, followed by just an easy gallop. But we'll get to see him in full stride, I imagine, before the week is up in preparation. That's Opry. He'll break from post 8 in an expected field of 14 for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And another Todd Pletcher turf runner, this one Breeders' Cup Turf at 1.5 miles, High Happy, out galloping. A nice gallop, too, Earspring. This is a horse I always liked, Joe. He put together a very nice string earlier in the season of back-to-back graded stakes wins, and his most recent, the Knickerbocker, kind of told me maybe he's coming right back into form.
Yeah, he likes to be forwardly placed, doesn't necessarily have to have the lead. There are some other horses in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf that are going to be faster than him early on, but he should be able to trip out. It's just a matter of if he can finish with the better horses in the race. That final quarter of a mile, he's had a successful campaign this year, earning over $760,000. And again, in contrast to what we saw with Opry, the first horse, just a light jog for him. This horse doing a little bit more this morning. And again, Kate, we've been talking about it during the course of the show. It's on a horse-by-horse basis, what they need and what's best for them. Younger horses, older horses, trainers definitely have to figure them out over the course of time.
And that is the Breeders' Cup Turf contender, High Happy, out galloping early this morning for Todd Pletcher at Churchill Downs. Huge string of New York horses arrived yesterday, so we're going to get a look at quite a few of them in the Breeders' Cup Mile. Looking ahead, we have Analyze It for Chad Brown. And I think it's always an eagerly awaited happening when we finally see the Todd Pletcher horses, the Chad Brown horses. Although both trainers have had some horses training here in Kentucky, the full string arriving, and usually that signals the arrival of the trainers as well on site. Analyze It, kind of a spirited move this morning. He was fourth most recently in the Chadwell Turf.
Yeah, he's a spirited horse. I remember seeing him in the paddock prior to the Chadwell Turf Mile, and his eyeballs were popping out of his head. He looked like he wanted to run through a brick wall. Ran okay that day to finish fourth. Races prior to that against strictly 3-year-olds in the Belmont Derby and the Secretariat, and also the Pennine Ridge at Belmont. Narrow defeats in all 3 of those races at the hooves of Catholic Boy and then the long shot Carrick in the Secretariat. 3-year-olds do okay in this race. Not a great draw for Analyze It, Kate, in post position number 12 for Chad Brown. I got a feeling this is going to be a horse that we're going to hear a lot more from in years to come.
And, you know, we often get asked about movement on the track and turf horses versus dirt horses. I think he's a classic example of a stereotypical turf horse as far as his motion is concerned, or his movement and action on the racetrack. You can see that he's not quite as pretty as some of the other horses on the track. He's very professional. He does everything he's supposed to do. He covers the ground nicely, but he has a little bit higher knee action. He's a little bit more narrow through the chest, but when you see him move on the turf, you'll see a very different style of action, and that is sometimes what distinguishes a horse to prefer one surface over another in terms of competition. And a lot of dirt horses will train well on any surface, but and turf horses too, but it's when the running gets going that it really counts, when they have to go at a high rate of speed.
So don't get confused if you see a turf horse and they're not moving that great on dirt to say, well, I'm going to downgrade their chances on the turf because that's not the way it goes in many, many cases. And you'll see, if I saw this horse training on dirt and I knew that he was a dirt horse, it would not be a positive. But this is a grass horse. He's never run on dirt. He's got a solid turn of foot. He's run at distances between a mile and a mile and a quarter with success. So versatile performer, again, a little bit up against it, I think, in the Breeders' Cup Mile as a 3-year-old against some classy older horses. But this is a horse that moving into 2019 and beyond could be a major player in the turf division here in North America.
And we switch gears to the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, and a horse who's on the outside looking in. Dream Pauline for Kieran McLaughlin. She'll be on the also eligibles, but I believe the plan for Kieran is to enter her back on Sunday if she doesn't draw in, which in all likelihood, hopefully is the case. No one wants to see anyone's misfortune, although I'm sure the camp was a bit disappointed about not getting the opportunity to run her in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, if that's indeed the case. Stone Street Stables owns this daughter of Tappet, who's undefeated in 2 starts. Her most recent win and allowance at Saratoga back in August. And this is the first time I've seen her since Saratoga. She is filling out for sure. She's pretty keen, Joe. That's, I think, why her head is cocked to the outside. I think her exercise rider's just making sure that she doesn't do more than she's supposed to here, particularly if this is one of her first days at Churchill Downs. And that's also why that piece of equipment, the fuzzy white that you see, that's sheepskin covering a leather yoke. That's just used to kind of help keep the horse's head in place down, and also primarily to kind of keep the saddle in place too. It attaches to a strip of leather underneath the saddle to the girth, and should the saddle slide just a little bit, that'll keep it from sliding too far. But sometimes if the rider takes a little hold of it, if the horse is getting a little aggressive, it can also work as a pressure point almost to trigger them to kind of relax. And so that's why it's cocked off to the side. But if the rider released it, it would probably be right underneath square in the middle of the chest.
Stone Street kept this one. They bred her. They own her. She is ridiculously well bred by Tappet out of the Wild Rush mare Dream Rush.
Very, very pretty face. If she doesn't make it on the racetrack, which she already has, she'd be quite the show horse.
There you go. And you know what? They probably knew that there was a pretty good chance they weren't going to get into the race with her credentials, which is just the maiden win and an A other than win. But she certainly looks like a horse with a very bright future.
So you see back there, we're on the first turn, right by the track. But if you go just a little bit, maybe not even half a mile from here, right there at the gap, somewhere out there, is Gabby Gaudette. Gabby, good morning.
I can see you guys, but I don't think you can see me. At least I can see your set, that is. But it's a wonderful morning once again. And as you were mentioning, the Root and Riddle post position draw was yesterday. So we see that all of the fields for Breeders' Cup weekend are set. And you know what that means? All the trainers start trickling into town. So things have become a little bit more populated here on the backstretch, especially at this particular gap because of where the horses ship into. They're going to be primarily entering and exiting this gap. So we're going to have a great perspective here of all the horses that shipped in yesterday afternoon and evening. And talking about some of those horses that shipped in, you guys touched on it, but we did see all of the horses for Todd Pletcher, Chad Brown, Kieran McLaughlin, and even Shug McGahee. So we'll be interested to see some of the other horses take to the track today. But I wanted to mention, you guys were talking about the trio of horses that we did see on track earlier for Chad Brown, Analyze It, Standard Deviation, and Thais. Just judging by how they walked on the track and walked off the track, I was actually most impressed by Thais, who's in the filly and mare turf. She just maintained great energy. I loved her energy coming off of the track, which is just as important, if not more important. A couple of other shippers that came in yesterday, the Aidan O'Brien contingent, he shipped in 15 horses yesterday. Now they headed back to the quarantine barn as per usual. Protocol is they have to stay in quarantine for at least 42 hours. So what they'll do in the time being is likely tack walk in the shed row, and they are expected to hit the track on Thursday morning. So we'll be looking forward to that. And also yesterday, sticking to the European theme, we did see Roaring Lion and Enable come out and stretch their legs just a little bit. They did a very light training yesterday. They went behind the gate here in the 1 mile chute, and they just jogged for about 15 to 20 minutes in figure eights and circles. So today we are expected to see them stretch their legs legs, maybe a little bit more. Roaring Lion is actually going to be training on the dirt around 7:30, and Enable will take to the turf later this morning at 9:35. So I think, guys, we got a little glimpse of what they're all about yesterday, but today we'll get even more of a glimpse.
Thank you, Gabby, and a very nice job yesterday at the Root and Riddle post position draw. A lot of questions answered, at least once that draw is underway, guys. And as we welcome in Brandon Staubel, who has do you have little turbo jets to get you down from the
like
clocker
the
stand up in the clubhouse down here?
Yeah, I guess an advantage of having this at your home track, you kind of know all the little nooks and crannies to cut through, and the quickest way to get places in there. So very fortunate that we're here, and just glad to be here. I mean, it's an exciting time.
You'll have to help Joe and me because we actually got lost on our way to the set. There's a little changing pattern every day here at Churchill.
We didn't get lost. We just
part of the surprise.
took a longer run.
Let's talk about some of the horses we're seeing. Again, many of them we're seeing for the first time, but War of Will was galloping. I know that was one you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Just kind of caught the eye yesterday. One thing, I haven't seen this horse work, I don't believe. He may have had one local breeze, and you can see him on the screen here. But during the gallops, I talk about this with you all the whole time I've been on. We're not just clocking other horses. We're also watching gallops in here. And yesterday, War of Will just kind of caught my eye, the way he was moving over the surface in here. Just a very fluid mover. That's another thing I look for in the mornings, too, the way horses move. Some horses move better than others. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to the afternoon, but it does have a good impact. I look for good movers, and I just thought War of Will yesterday just really caught the eye, just very composed. We talk all the time about the ears being up, very alert, and you can see, I mean, you talk about ears pricked, that's the definition of ears pricked right there, and then that mane just flowing in the wind. It's just a really nice, looks very fit, just a nice mover, and it just really caught the eye galloping yesterday. So I'll take note of that, and if it comes to a decision, whether leaving the horse on or off or going deeper in a race, something like this is going to sway my opinion, and you'd be surprised how many times it actually works out in your favor.
Given that he is priming for the juvenile turf and you're watching him train on the main track on the dirt, I mean, how does that figure into your thinking for the race?
Maybe just a little bit, but Mark Casse trains most of his turf horses on the dirt, and that doesn't really necessarily here, at least anyways, breeze any of them on the turf. And I'll look at the action a little bit, and typically you talk about the turf horses having the high knee action. He doesn't really have the really high knee action. He's got a little bit of it, but just a really good mover, and I like the way he was flowing over the ground in there.
Yeah, just kind of floats, and this horse showed speed in the Bourbon. It was an honest pace last time, ran fourth, but did not give in, ran onto the wire, and has improved with every start.
Yeah, and just one of those horses that you're going to get a game effort, it seems like, from, because he ran hard in the summer, he ran hard in the Bourbon, and he's training well here. And, sometimes those races when you've got 6 or 7 lined up down the lane, and a couple of them maybe don't want to be in a battle like that, this guy might want to be.
From a galloper to a worker, we're going to go back to Monday's works, and that was just yesterday, actually. Yeah. Chatelaine was one of the 2 workers you wanted to take a look at.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this filly. She was a little headstrong in there, but hopefully everybody that's been watching the show, they all know the work before the race. Steve Asmussen doesn't ask him to do a lot. That's the MO for all the way down to a $10,000 maiden claimer, all the way up to his top horses, his grade 1 horses in here. And you can see she's wanting to do more. She's on the bit a little bit, and check out the rider, how far up on the reins he's got. I mean, you can see that there's plenty of rein actually kind of hitting his arms because he grabbed her so hard. He does not want this filly to do much at all, and she's moving really well down the lane. The ears are up. Might bother me a little bit if this was a distance horse, the fact that she's pretty headstrong in here, but she's a turf sprinter. She wants to go. I want to see that from a turf sprinter, and I really like this filly a lot. She has impressed me in the last 2 starts up at Saratoga, at Keeneland, and I said after the Keeneland race, I said, man, I hope they take a chance in here, because I believe they're selling her at Keeneland after the race, so I said, I hope they take a chance in here, and then a couple days later, I heard she was entered. Really excited about her. She's got tactical speed, and she has impressed me as well in the mornings out of her race.
Brandon, there's a fine line between when a horse is really keen like that, being a signal that they're a little over the top or have almost done too much and they're due for kind of a lackluster effort,
Right.
and a horse who's just sitting on go and ready to run a prime effort. How do you determine that when you watch a horse like that?
Yeah, I think it's about knowing the horse. It's about, like we just talked about, she's a turf sprinter. Now, if that was a distance horse, I'd be a little more concerned, even if she's a turf sprinter. But if she was really, that head was really just flying up and she had no idea what the rider was trying to do, the ears. I mean, those are all big things I look at, but also just knowing the horse too, and have an advantage of knowing her because she's based here locally all the time. But just knowing the horse a little bit. And like I said, a route horse that's going 1.25 miles doing that, maybe not so much.
Chanceline looks to become the first female to win the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprints. It's Misdirection. Did it in back-to-back years, Brandon, and she's got the right style.
Yeah.
You alluded to it. She can kind of just sit mid-pack and finish. She's 15-1 in the morning line. Do you like that?
Oh, I love that. She's got speed and too. And if let's say that the pace something happens and she needs to be more forwardly placed, she can do that too. And not to mention her trainer, I cashed on this horse too, Regally Ready, over this turf course, so he knows how to get a turf sprint in the Breeders' Cup. Really excited about her, if you can't tell.
Well, a guy who knows how to get a Breeders' Cup winner ready, Bill Mott, sent out Yoshida for a workout. And I was really interested in the way Bill did this work. Brandon, it was yesterday. He actually, and he's done this before, galloped the horse, pulled Yoshida up, and that took all Penny had to get him pulled up, controlled, caught his breath, and then turned around and breezed.
Yeah, we had the gallop on the screen, I believe, yesterday or the day before. And you're right. So Bill and this is what he does with a lot of the horses here at Churchill, lets them gallop once around, kind of warm up, so to say, and then you're right. I mean, he kind of like comes over, makes sure everything's okay, and then we'll go ahead with the breeze. I really love, you can see the ears are just pricked. I mean, this horse is just doing it so easy. I really love horses that can, the work before, go 47, 59, and then slow it down and go 49 and 3. To me, that's his quality, and it shows me that the horse has all the ability in the world to go as long as we want. Obviously, we know Yoshida can route. You can see down the lane there. I always talk about watching the hands of the rider. She's just got a big handful here, and you take a look at just watch the hind legs, just the power that Yoshida's getting behind in there. And then you also mentioned too Bill Mott over Churchill Downs. Drosselmeyer, and was the last Breeders' Cup Classic champion. I mean, he was the all-time leading trainer in here. But Yoshida looks great. Been really impressed with his gallops, his works. I mean, he's sitting on a big race. He's got the right trainer, and, he's going to be on my tickets.
Penny Chavez, the rider for Bill Mott, doing an excellent job. We see her in the morning in action on a regular basis here at Churchill Downs. Brandon, get your turbo rockets boosted up there and get back
ready.
up to the top.
How
There's
many
a lot to
watches
see.
you carrying at one time?
Just one, but sometimes I'll keep it going, and it's all the way up to maybe 10 minutes straight, so depending on how busy the action is now. So excited to see the Euros come back out again. It was fun yesterday.
Some great stuff. Thanks so much. We're going to also continue our focus on the Breeders' Cup Classic, since we just saw Yoshida among those who have now drawn into the field. Thunder Snow drawing the rail. Catholic Boy is in post position 3. You see the rest of the field as it's laid out. Yoshida will break from post 10, and there are two also eligibles. This is the field. The two also eligibles are Collected at 30-1 and Toast of New York at 20-1. If Toast of New York doesn't make it in there, I believe he was going to look for another race.
Yeah, they said the marathon. I don't remember seeing his name on that field. This we just quickly talk about these post positions. Thunder Snow, they can't be thrilled about the rail. And Accelerate, I know John Sadler said, oh, it's a great post for us. I'm sorry, man, but post 14, this horse has a little bit of a trouble time breaking from the starting gate, might break out. I know it's a long run into the first turn, Kate, and then he's got tactical speed, but I'm sure that they would have preferred a little bit more to the middle of the pack.
Well, going back to Yoshida in post position 10, he'll be ridden by Jose Ortiz, and we did catch up with Bill Mott following his workout.
And then we worked Yoshida this morning just after the 7 o'clock break, and he went very well. Half mile, 49 and 3 or 4, and galloped out in 102 and change. Got over the track good, was well into the bridle, finished up well, galloped out nicely, and seemed to come back to the barn in good order. I don't think you can ever be overly confident when you're in these kind of races. The competition is, world class. We've got the best horses, in the country that it's a big purse, and everybody's going to be trying hard, and I'm sure their horses are all doing well coming into it.
Most important, Bill, how's your confidence level compare with Drosselmeyer?
I'd say it's pretty good. You know, I mean, this horse is really doing well. I'd say at least as good as it was with Drosselmeyer, not better.
There's a man who knows how to play poker.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't have been confident with Drosselmeyer. I almost fell down when that horse won.
Well, I think when he goes in there, he knows how they're training, and if they're in there, he believes that they're in there with purpose. So I would say that for sure.
Right.
Channel Maker is also a runner for Bill Mott, who is pointing for the Breeders' Cup Turf. It's a horse who does like some give in the ground. Had a very nice win in the Turf Classic on soft turf at Belmont Park, and you see he draws post position 3.
Great post for him.
It is a great post. He has a little tactical speed in it, especially if we do get the rain that they're talking about and the turf course is yielding to soft. I think it's going to really improve Channel Maker's chances. He's another that's looked very good on the track.
He has. He looked good training on dirt, too, and this allows him to go to the lead with Jose if none of the others go, but Glorious Empire is going to show speed too. If Glorious Empire shows speed and crosses over and Channel Maker can just sit in the pocket, that's a great trip for him. And I find it interesting that the defending champ Talismanic and this year's even money favorite Enable drawn right next to one another on the inside.
Well, Mott also has a runner in the juvenile and Topper T. No runners in this year's Breeders' Cup Distaff, but don't feel too bad for him. He's already capitalized with 5 of his 10 Breeders' Cup victories coming with the fillies and mares, and many of them were right here at Churchill Downs. Let's take a trip down memory lane.
Odds on in the gate, and they are off in the distaff. It's Asina who breaks sharply on the outside. Banshee Breeze and Keeper Hill will both off to good beginnings. Captain Music is right up there. And Kirby Song down toward the inside. Under the line the first time. And Gary Stevens establishes the lead quickly with Asina. Asina establishes the pace into the turn. But Captain Music is not far behind. Kirby Song rides the rails in third. And the favorite Banshee Breeze is right up there, keeping Asina well within her sights. She's only about 3.5 lengths from the lead. And that one is followed by Keeper Hill. And a break of another 3 to Dancing Gulch and the fellow long shot Tuxedo Junction. Late running Tommy Sue's Delight trying to settle into stride here. She's about 10 lengths behind the lead. The opening quarter went in 23 and 4/5 seconds, and it is Asina running unopposed down the lead. The pace for the half, 47 and 3/5 seconds. Sensible enough here with Asina in control as they move to the half-mile pole. Captain Music is second. Banshee Breeze has been maneuvered to the outside for a clear shot at the lead as they move into the far turn. Still relatively unhurried is Banshee Breeze. Keeper Hill is hard on her heels as Kirby Song starts to tail off. Rounding the far turn, they have to catch Asina. It's still Asina who will arrive at the top of the stretch with Banshee Breeze to take a run at her. Captain Music is in between horses. Keeper Hill toward the inside. Asina full throttle off the turn, put to a full-out drive. Banshee Breeze is trying to get to her, a length and a half behind. Keeper Hill is third with 1 furlong to go. It is Asina under the whip, trying to fend off Banshee Breeze, and Asina is still there at the 16th pole. A final try from Banshee Breeze. She's lengthening her stride. It's going to be close. Here's the line. Asina and Banshee Breeze hit the line together. A photo finish in the distance. Well, Asina desperately coming to the wire, gasping with those long strides of the daughter of unbridled Banshee Breeze.
And away they go in the Ladies Classic to an absolutely perfect start, but then Life at 10, no interest, and Life at 10 has dropped far back early. Quickest into stride on the inside, we have Malibu Prayer up alongside of that comes Acting Happy and Coma on the outside. Those three keep the pressure on one another. Just in behind that comes Unrivaled Bell. Unrivaled Bell settling down in the 4th position now. Milwaukee Appeal scrapes the paint 3 lengths off these leaders. In behind that comes It's Tea Time. Ever de Grace is racing back in 7th, 5 lengths off that leader. It's another 3 back to Persistently seeking the title, and Blind Luck at the back of the pack is a good 10 lengths off these leaders, and just showing no interest at this stage. A long, long way last is Life at 10. They go on down the backstretch towards the 5/8 now, and it is Malibu Prayer setting a good pace. Malibu Prayer a length and a half to Acting Happy. A Coma is in 3rd. Milwaukee Appeal down at the rail. Unrivaled Bell being patiently ridden from the 5th spot. Then It's Tea Time. Have Her de Grace is now 7 lengths off the leaders. Then comes Persistently. Racing on the inside of Persistently. Now we have Blind Luck, who's starting to roll from behind. Blind Luck still 8 off them, those seeking the title inside of her. They are coming to the quarter pole in the Ladies Classic, and Unrivaled Bell now goes up to strike the front, and Cat de Sorvo and Unrivaled Bell telling them you're going to have to come and catch me to win it. Here comes Havre de Grace. Havre de Grace running a huge one in the centre. A Cobra along the inside, and here's Blind Luck, and Blind Luck is coming like an express train on the outside. Unrivaled Bell digs deep, finds more. Blind Luck is closing the gap with each and every stride. Havre de Grace in there as well, but it's Unrivaled Bell coming home to score, and it is going to be Unrivaled Bell and Cat de Sorvo take the Ladies Classic in a huge performance. Blind Luck ran her heart out, had to settle for second, then Havre de Grace, and it's tea time, finished up fourth. Classic, and they all came out well, and Plum Pretty just goes straight to the front now. Plum Pretty clears them by over a length and goes on to lead them. In the second spot we have It's Tricky. Up alongside of that comes Ask the Moon. It's Tricky's in tight down at the rail now. They've been followed by Royal Delta, who's in the green cap, settling into the fourth position. Behind that comes Pash Attack, and then back to Super Espresso racing sixth. She's a good 6 lengths off the leaders. Mismatch has been taken back to be third last. Ultra Blend is second last. And last of all is Satan's Quick Check, got to be 10 lengths off the leaders. Down the backstretch they go now, and Rafael Bejarano is rated Plum Pretty beautifully out here. She's got her ears pricked. Plum Pretty takes them along at a sensible pace. A length and a quarter back to Ask the Moon in second. It's Tricky's at the rail third. Now here's Royal Delta in the fourth position. Royal Delta 3 lengths off that leader. Super Espresso's on the far side, and Pash Attack, White Cap at the rail. Mismatch is back third last, now got 8 lengths to make up. Then it's Ultra Blend, and last of all is Satan's Quick Check. They have 3/8 of a mile to go now, and Plum Pretty still bouncing along on the lead. Plum Pretty a length and a half. On the far side we have Ask the Moon. It's Tricky. Now It's Tricky is coming on to take on Plum Pretty. Royal Delta's going to have to make up ground. Royal Delta's fourth on the outside. They're at the top of the lane in the Ladies Classic, and Plum Pretty hugs the rail and kicks for home, and she's got something left. Plum Pretty going on for home gamely now. In the centre, It's Tricky stretching her every yard of the way. Royal Delta's getting involved late as well. Plum Pretty along the inside. It's Tricky racing between them and Royal Delta. It's a thriller. Royal Delta's going to score. Royal Delta strikes the front, and Royal Delta, perfectly handled, has taken the Ladies Classic. She's won a division for the year too. Royal Delta, It's Tricky, Pash Attack ran on for third. Ultra Blend and Plum Pretty got tired that last.
The stars will align on November 4th when the top buyers from around the globe gather at Basing-Tipton for the world's premier breeding stock event. One spectacular evening with a catalog featuring no less than 70 graded stakes winners or producers, with nearly half of those being grade ones. Plus a stellar selection of Breeders' Cup winners, champions, and selected weanlings. No other sale packs as much energy and excitement into a single session. Join us for a night of stars, the November sale at Basing-Tipton. Where will you be?
I know where I'd be today, right now. That would be with everybody else who is right now in the WinStar Basing-Tipton Breeders' Cup Breakfast Marquee. I have heard it is spectacular. We want to welcome all of them that are joining us here for breakfast at Breeders' Cup, and hopefully we will get a shot to get there when we're done with the show, Joe. They say there's a 360-degree panoramic view of the racetrack, and I've heard that the breakfast is second to none. And, of course, the view, watching these horses train, can't be beat.
Yeah, first class all the way for sure. And more horses arriving. When Brandon Sauble came in here, he was talking about the extra buzz that he's felt, not only on the racetrack, but with all the extra people that have arrived for the draw yesterday and that's spilling over onto our backstretch today.
Let's pick up the action with a horse that's on the track right now for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, and a look at the field. Finds Baby Nina in post position 6. She is among the longest shots in the race. And to that effect, there's been some fine-tuning as far as equipment is concerned, among some other things. The connections feel that this is a tall task, to be sure, but she has the pedigree by flatter out of a more than ready mare. Certainly the distance seemed to be her friend. She ran a decent race last time in the slop, but she broke her maiden at Thistledown. She is going to have to find a new dimension to tackle the likes of some of the favorites, Restless Rider, Jaywalk, and Bellafina, the likely favorite for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. But there's a look at Baby Nina on the track, and she certainly has the scope to be the type of horse who would like a little bit of distance, and by flatter, you would expect that would quite literally flatter her.
Luch Racing, a big supporter of Ohio racing, Ohio breds racing at Thistledown, obviously, as well. And, this is the guy that won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies with Rhea Antonia.
Exactly.
So
she was big odds that day.
Yeah, anything can happen, as she proved that day. Now, based on the competition she's facing, obviously she's going to add blinkers. I would guess that she's going to show some speed. This is a tall task, to say the least, but no hotter rider in the country right now than Tyler Gaffleone, so seems to be a good match.
Just wrapped up a title at Keeneland Racecourse's leading jockey, riding there regularly for the first time. Let's check in with Anthony Cordarolo. He had some comments, particularly about the addition of blinkers.
She still hasn't figured it all out. She's a little funny out of the gate. Sometimes she doesn't come out real sharp, but she's getting better. And there's a lot of speed. That's why Ron decided to run in that, because she feels there's a lot of speed, and maybe she can pick up some pieces at the end. We were trying blinkers on her for the first time, and we took her to the gate, and she acted really, really well. She came out a lot better. I think she's a little bit more focused after that, so we'll see what happens.
And now she gets to pick it up a little bit with a nice jog and a little hobby horse there to warm up. Toward the outside, take a look at everything again, especially with the young horses when you're training and the scenery is changing every day with all the pomp and circumstance surrounding the Breeders' Cup. You want to give the young horses, any horse for that matter, a chance to kind of look at everything before they have to turn around and do their more serious exercise.
Yeah, the racetrack just opened after the renovation break at 7:30. We're going to see the Breeders' Cup exclusive dirt time now, and Baby Nina, one of the first horses out there. And again, we looked at that field. There's a lot of speed in the Tito's Handmade Vodka Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, Serengeti Empress, Vibrance, talking about Jaywalk, also Bellafina, the favorite who drew post position number 10. And we've got much better for Bob Baffert. We saw this horse for the first time on the racetrack yesterday, a juvenile turf competitor.
Yeah, this is a guy by Pioneer of the Nile who was second in the Zuma Beach to King of Speed as the beaten favorite. That was his first try on the turf and his first try at a mile. And I think he can certainly improve off the effort for Three Chimneys Farm. Drayden Van Dyke will ride him from post position number 3 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And kind of a really neatly put together, compact little dynamo, I think much better is. Very nicely balanced here under Dana. I'm not sure if that's Dana Barnes or not, but Dana, of course, one of many great riders that works for Bob Baffert, but does tend to travel a lot with her husband, Jimmy, who's assistant trainer and literally right hand of the Bob Baffert operation. So they typically travel as a team. That might be her on board. Looks like her, and I like the way this one travels much better. Has kind of a roundness about the stride, and you can see a lot of strength through the chest and shoulder. Has kind of the look of a sprinter, and yet the pedigree to be able to carry that speed at a longer distance.
Yeah, if you look at the pedigree, you think as much dirt, probably more so than turf, by Pioneer of the Nile, who Bob Baffert obviously used to train out of a Vindication mare. Debuted on dirt and won, and then was second in the Zuma Beach. This race is a tough task maybe for much better, but very well drawn with tactical speed. We've been watching Yoshida train for the last several days, had that somewhat unorthodox workout, not necessarily for Bill Mott, the way he trains yesterday, back on the track today, which is obviously a very good sign.
Yeah, well, and sort of typical It's interesting because some trainers opt to walk right after a work, but Todd Pletcher is one who always sends his horses out for a little bit of exercise the day after work and then will walk 2 days after. And Bill may very well be doing the same thing, or he may well opt to train each day just with a little something leading up to the Breeders' Cup, because now these are finely tuned horses, and if the work has accomplished its goal, the horse is feeling like $1 million afterwards. You don't want to take a horse that's full of energy and ready to go and keep them cooped up in the stall, or even in the barn, in order to make sure that they don't get carried away with themselves or too pumped up with no place to use that energy. They send him to the track to do a little something. But again, this is the wrong way, and he's doing a nice little gallop, but he knows, and the rider knows, that it's not about doing anything with any great speed. He's supposed to stay controlled. He stumbled just a little bit, and that's just because he feels good. He's kind of wanting to do a bit more, but he knows he's not supposed to, and the rider's not going to let him do any more than what he's doing right now.
Yeah, certainly feeling good, and like you said, more so than anything, just getting out of the stall, stretching the legs, and releasing a little bit of that energy. We talked about the fact that we're going to see a lot of the New York-based horses for the first time. We've been watching Robert Bruce, courtesy of video from Naira in recent days. Now we get our first look at him live. Not only do we get to see him, but we get to see Complexity, who is the likely favorite in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
And that's Robert Bruce in the back and Complexity in the front. And this is a great opportunity to see two very different types of horses. And as would be expected, a 2-year-old in Complexity is 2 for 2. A much more seasoned turf horse, older horse, runs longer distances. He's going to run 1.5 miles on the turf. Robert Bruce is a bit bigger. See if he kind of has a bit more purpose. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do, whereas Complexity is going to look around just a little bit, because this is a bit of a newer experience for him. Remember, he's really only raced a couple of times, so now he's flown to the big city, or in this case, the smaller city, comparatively speaking, as he's been in New York with Chad Brown's string. But he's kind of probably wondering what's going on and checking things out, quite literally, much as a young adult or even a teenager would do the first time they take a plane ride and go someplace new, all wide-eyed and just taking it all in. But he was pretty professional. Robert Bruce, you can see, though, a bit more focused. He just is a little more seasoned and knows the drill.
For sure. We saw Complexity out there with the pony, and now joining another member of that star brigade, all these horses very accomplished, is Sister Charlie, probably the best American hope in the filly and mare turf for Chad Brown. Chad Brown won his first Breeders' Cup race, Caton, in 2008. He's won 9 more since 2012.
So, Joe, I just want to make note, we saw the rider aboard Robert Bruce. When he stopped and he stood the horse up, it looked to me like he said a little prayer and crossed himself. And a lot of the exercise riders have routines that they do with horses, and jockeys too. You'll often see cross themselves before they go in the gate, or they'll do a little silent prayer, make a gesture. Some of them ride with St. Christopher medals on, tucked into their helmet or someplace, just to wish for a safe trip. And in this case, you know how much responsibility is riding on these riders to get these horses around the track safely to do their job. Yesterday at EquestriaCon, I had opportunity to listen into some storytellers, some people on the backstretch talking about their experiences, not necessarily with Breeders' Cup horses, but with horses in general. But they were talking about what a privilege it is to have the opportunity to get to know what their passion is and to get to see it fulfilled by doing it every day. And that's really what is happening when you're watching these exercise riders on the track and the people that work with the horses on the backside.
So much goes on behind the scenes.
I wish we could give each one of them props by name, because what they do is an important and integral part of the task of getting those horses to the track and to the starting gate. And when you see a winner, you know there's a whole team of people behind them.
And they travel all over the world. We just saw Roaring Lion there briefly, and now here we see Discreet Lover, from a world-traveling European who has won multiple Group 1s to Discreet Lover, a huge long-shot winner for a trainer that doesn't have a lot of horses in Uriah St. Louis. And again, you talk about the people behind the scenes, Kate, and you talk about some of the different kind of storylines. This horse making it to the Breeders' Cup after winning the Jockey Club Gold Cup last time out at a massive price. Just another one of the many, many, many great stories, rags to riches stories, so to speak.
He truly is. I think most thought that he was a very honest horse that had a style as such that would be conducive to collecting a check in big races over and over again. But I don't know that very many people besides Uriah himself really thought he was capable of winning one of those big races. And so when it happened, it was one of those magical moments.
Magical.
And he had bet a couple dollars on him as well.
45
at huge
to 1.
odds.
Yeah.
45 to 1. He says he'll be betting on him again. And
He'll
feels
be 45 to 1 again.
feels very confident that his horse can duplicate his efforts in New York last time out. I believe the horse can get a share of the purse, to be sure. He has earned his way in, had a win and you're in victory, but also the fact that he comes back even after being beaten and tries hard every time looks to me like he's maintained his weight. I don't see anything in what he's doing here on the track that would suggest that he's going the wrong way or tailing off, and that's all you can hope for at this stage of the game. But it is kind of what dreams are made of, and that was a truly magical moment. And should he be successful in the Breeders' Cup, I think it would be one of those moments that everyone would remember going forward as one of the great upsets in Breeders' Cup history.
Manny Franco gets along really well with this horse, part of that team with Uriah St. Louis, and they're just going to take back and make one run, and there should be an honest pace in the race as well. Horses from all different divisions on the racetrack. We're seeing dirt horses like Discreet Lover, lots of turf horses. We briefly saw Roaring Lion, lots of grass horses on the dirt right now, including Saddler's Joy. We're going to see some turf horses on the grass a little bit later on.
So Saddler's Joy is a cool horse. How long have we been seeing him? I mean, he is one of the elder statesmen of the group in here, and he just kind of keeps doing it. That's what I'm amazed at. He might not be quite as brilliant as he was a little earlier, but that said, he still continues to hold his flesh. He looks like a young horse on the racetrack. He's sharp, and he's capable of a big race. So I just so enjoy watching a horse like him because you get to know him, really.
Yeah,
and he's
true.
had some hard luck trips. But he's
slow paces in his last three races. I mean, really slow. This is a horse that comes from way out of it that needs a little bit of pace up
He's
front.
very, very cool. He was third, beaten 10 lengths by Channelmaker and Robert Bruce in the Turf Classic. That was on soft ground. He was second in the Man Award, a 1 3/8 on good ground at Belmont. He probably doesn't mind if there's some give in the ground, to be sure. He does not have any early speed. He has to just lay back and make that one run. He's never raced at Churchill Downs, which is remarkable. He's 5, and he's started 21 times. And I think I've been watching him his entire career. But I just really admired this horse for Woods Lane Farm. Tom Albatrani has done such a nice job with him, keeping him very happy throughout his career. And I'd love to see him, make a statement and be part of the exotics here. And I don't think that's so far out of the question.
$1.7 million in the bankroll. And there is, for a 1.5 mile turf race, a decent amount of early speed in this particular race. And, like you said, he's a one-run type closer. He's going to take back. He's going to try to get some cover. He's going to come out for the stretch run and try to pass as many horses as he can, whether that's 2, 3, 5, 7, or 8 horses. That remains to be seen, but he will be finishing.
Tom Albatrani and his wife Fonda worked for Bill Mott during the cigar days when Mott had the great cigar. You'll see a number of horsemen that have horses in this year's Breeders' Cup that are proteges of other horsemen, world-class Hall of Fame horsemen that also have horses in the Breeders' Cup, and that's really kind of a fun reunion of sorts for a lot of them, too. There's Valdori for the distaff, and I think that's Jimmy Barnes on the pony next door. Valdori, just with the pony as a companion, maybe to help her as she just keep her comfortable and also reassure her should she see something to react from. He may turn her loose and let her gallop, or he may just stay with her all the way around.
Tremendous year last year for Valdori. 4 wins from 6 starts. She had a nice winning streak. Not quite the same horse this year, but she really turned it around in the Zenyatta. That was the race where her stablemate Abel Tasman just threw in an absolute clunker. Veldori took advantage. She won that race at 11-1. And interestingly enough, Caton, as a 6-year-old with 21 lifetime starts, it was the addition of blinkers at this point of her career that may have actually helped her turn things back around. So to me, she's a wild card in the Longines Breeders' Cup Distaff. She seems to be headed back in the right direction, but is that good enough against the likes of Monomoy Girl, Blue Prize, and her stablemate Abel Tasman if they bring their A game?
Now, it looks like they're waiting for a turn to School in the Gate, which is set up in the chute. They're talking to the assistant starters, and there may be some other horses in front of them. So you kind of have to wait your turn. And that also is a nice opportunity for the horse to just get settled and comfortable and not feel like every single time they go over there, they've got to go break and run in a race. If he did that every single time, then the adrenaline would be so crazy. The horses would get stirred up and on edge the minute they'd see a starting gate. But this way, you take them back. You make them a little bit more comfortable. It is kind of an intimidating foreign thing for horses to walk up to the big metal starting gate and into a confined space. But the more times they go over, the more comfortable they get with it. And I'm always impressed with the way they adapt and adjust to things like the starting gate.
We're going to see a lot of schooling, gate schooling, paddock schooling, particularly with a lot of the Europeans who are not only seeing Churchill Downs for the first time, but racing in America is a completely different ballgame. A lot of the horses that just came in from New York and obviously California as well, paddock schooling. Not only today, Caton, but I know we got to see quite a few paddock schoolers when we raced on Sunday, opening day at Churchill. We race tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, leading up to Breeders' Cup Friday and Saturday. If you're here in Louisville, coming out to the races and not only play the races at Churchill, but come on down to the paddock because you never know who you're going to see.
So you saw the assistant starter actually climbed in the stall and he patted her on the head and he talked to her a little bit. And he'll also get to know if there's any little idiosyncrasies about the horse. The assistant starters will be keyed in on and taking notes. Some horses don't want to be handled in the gate or have a person up with them. Others would prefer to have that person there. Now she gallops off. Dana probably let her stirrups up a notch or so, but not a whole lot as she gallops off.
Yeah, and again, you talked earlier about the people behind the scenes, Kate. Not only the people that work with the horses for the individual stables every morning, but the people that work at the racetrack, the pony people, the outriders, the gate people, and great point that you made about the horse getting familiar with the gate, but also the gate crew getting familiar with the horses, taking little notes. We want to make sure that we have an absolute perfect start for every race, getting the horses in the gate, getting them to stand kindly. That's not only good for the connections of the individual horses, it's good for the safeties of the safety of the jockeys, and it's good for the bettors as well because we want a clean start. We want a cleanly run horse race. Doesn't always play out that way. Obviously, there's quite a few horses in a race, and a lot of things can happen both out of the gate and during the running of the race. But again, from the time they enter the starting gate till the time they leave the starting gate, safety is the number one factor, and a fairly run race is also obviously very important. We're taking a look now at Stellar Agent for the Juvenile Fillies Turf, and again, all of these races were drawn yesterday. We've been working off the pre-entries for the better part of the last week. We do have post positions now. We're going to be going over those fields during the course of the morning here and kind of talking post positions and talking a little bit about maybe pace scenarios and race strategies. You're taking a look now at Stellar Agent for the Juvenile Fillies Turf, part of Future Stars Friday, which is a new introduction as far as the way the races are played out during Breeders' Cup weekend. All 2-year-old races on Friday, including the Juvenile Fillies Turf. And we're taking a look here at Stellar Agent, and with a pony, looking good on the racetrack. George Abreu, the trainer, was most recently third in the Miss Griot behind the likely favorite in the race, Newspaper of Record for Chad Brown, who has been absolutely dominant. One of the turf races on Breeders' Cup weekend where it looks like an American will actually be favored.
And Georgie spent a lot of time working with Bobby Frankel, and not Bobby Frankel, but Chad Brown, who worked for Bobby Frankel. And so there's a legacy of working with Breeders' Cup horses and around Breeders' Cup horses. And so he has a lot of experience knowing what goes into preparing them. Stellar Agent is coming in off of that third place finish. I thought that was encouraging off of Breaking Your Maiden. A lot of times that second start is the start that turns over the apple cart a little bit. You either make it or break it. And a lot of young horses really react the second time they go over to the paddock, but to come up with a big race in a stakes company in your second start is quite an accomplishment.
First try around 2 turns as well, and Chase, an absolute monster and newspaper of record. Disco Partner, one of the top contenders for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprints, veteran performer who has run 26 times, has banked $1.2 million. It looked like maybe Caden, this horse's form had tailed off just a little bit up until his most recent start at Belmont. And I know he didn't beat much that day, but it was the way he did it. If you get a chance, go back and watch the replay. This son of Disco Rico, the gorgeous gray, is not hard to spot when you're watching races or watching replays. Kind of stands out a little bit. But he won that race under mild urging, was razor sharp, earned a lofty speed figure. And again, that was his first race since early August. He should be able to maybe take another step forward here. He was in the races at Belmont in the summer where he didn't perform all that well. But again, they tried a mile at one point, kind of reevaluated his progress, gave him a little bit of time off, and then came back with that huge run last time.
This race is the race for the elders, right? Disco Partner at age 6, Conquest Tsunami is 6. They still stay that fast. It's quite a testament to their fortitude as well as their speed and ability. Let's check in with Gabby.
Thank you, Caton. I had a really cool perspective here on the backstretch, kind of right smack dab in the middle of the backstretch here. So you could see horses really getting over the track and getting out of the turn and paying attention to their lead switches and how they are handling these turns, the surface, etc. So I want to start with a couple of horses that I noticed pointed for the Breeders' Cup Classic, Roaring Lion being one of them. Of course, yesterday he took it easy, just jogging behind the gate in the chute, but today he had a little bit of a canter. I would say it was a light canter today, but to me, guys, he did seem a little bit awkward. Now, this is his first day taking to the track, so obviously it kind of looked like he was over-analyzing what he was doing. Maybe that's not the best way to be describing it, but I would say that it was a little awkward from what I saw in terms of his lead switches and him just traveling over the track. Now, that could be because this is his first day over the track, and it could be because he wasn't going fast enough. Once sometimes they pick it up a bit more, then those lead changes come easier to him. So I'll be interested to see what he does tomorrow and how he looks. Accelerate, he actually went back and stood in the gate in the chute, and then he picked up a gallop around here. I thought he looked good, good energy levels. One horse, though, in particular that surprised me, Guinevere. He's a horse that is usually very lethargic. I'm well familiar with this horse, even in his 3-year-old campaign. He's never much of a horse that wants to do much in the morning, and today he was strong. He took a hold of the bridle, especially on the backstretch, so lots of energy that I saw from Guinevere here this morning. A couple of other horses that I wanted to mention, Wonder Cadet for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. We were talking about one of her final workouts in prep for the Breeders' Cup, and how she was really keen to get to the pole and to break off from the pole. Today, once again, she was so keen. I've never seen a horse do anything like this before. She was pretty much leaping in the air, really long stride, leaping after leap after leap. And then after that, she settled a bit. She went back and stood at the gate, and I got the chance to kind of speak to Mark Cassie, her trainer, and he said she has always done that throughout her career, and the more leaps, the better she's doing, so that's not a fear for him. Last but certainly not least, we did see a couple of horses take to the track, some juveniles. Paquette, guys, she just seems like she's doing better and better each day. I know, Caton, that you really liked her workout for Todd Pletcher. I wasn't I wasn't thrilled the first couple of days that I saw her, but her coat has completely changed. Her weight has completely changed. So I really like the improvement that I've seen from her, and I've loved the improvement that we've seen from 40 under for Jeremiah Englehart. So a couple of these juveniles were getting a look really for the first time. Code of Honor, Shug McGahee. This is a horse that I was well familiar with over the course of the summer at Saratoga. He's not the flashiest type of horse, really kind of slight, not one that you would think of as a good, attractive looking horse, but I like the way that he traveled over the course today. So maybe something to keep in the back of our mind. Complexity got off the track in good order. He too was a little awkward with his lead switches though, so maybe when they pick up his training tomorrow, we'll see a more fluid stride. So guys, there's so much going on, but from this perspective, we really got to get some good notes here today.
Some great information, Gabby, and fortunately for all the horsemen, all the horses thus far are doing much better than I am so far as dealing with the weather. But I promise I sound a lot worse than I feel right now.
That's the most important thing, and man, you're a trooper. Restless Rider is on the racetrack now, and she is in the Tito's Handmade Vodka Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, and she was an impressive winner, bet like she was supposed to win at Keeneland last out, and she came through for her many backers at 6-5. And Kate, the way the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies plays out on paper, there's a lot of speed. Restless Rider has good tactical speed around 2 turns. She, if she breaks well, should be able to set a beautiful trip.
She really has been training beautifully. I think Kenny McPeak has to be thrilled with everything as it's progressing for Restless Rider. Her last race, the way she came out of it, the way she continues to train. She's a very progressive filly, meaning she is just forward motion, and also I think getting better and better. You can see her on the track right now. She almost seems to be galloping with more confidence each day that we take a look at her. And she's a strong-looking filly, covers some ground with her stride, just does everything on cue. I really am coming to like this filly more and more every time I see her.
She's had an interesting young career. She fell behind the gate in her first race and still won. Then in her second race, she had to check and go around a horse and looked like she was hopelessly beaten, and she won by more than 11. And then in the spinaway, she was a good second behind Sipacan Harbor. And then, of course, last time out in the Alcibiades, she really put it all together. So Restless Rider is a horse for Kenny McPeak, who knows his way around a good filly and around a good horse, who should be able to make a major impact, not only based on her form, but the way the race plays out for the Tito's Handmade Vodka Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. A lot of these fillies will wind up on the Oaks Trail. Some of them will eventually become sprinters, like this gal, Highway Star, for the Filly and Bear Sprint.
And Highway Star is hoping to follow in the hoofprints of an awful lot of good fillies who have won Breeders' Cup sprint races even before they had their own category, Joe. So I always think that the fillies kind of get the best of both worlds, because they could tackle the boys or they can stay in their own division. Of course, the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint at 7 furlongs here at Churchill Downs, and Highway Star is coming off the win in the Iroquois for the same owners, Chester and Mary Broman, who scored the big upset in last year's Filly and Mare Sprint. Highway Star, 5-year-old mare, 9 for 21 lifetime, was the favorite last time. It was restricted company. She has dabbled in graded stakes company, but she is a New York bred. Kind of a fun filly to root for, to be sure. And like so many of them, really seems to be enjoying the cool weather.
Yeah, the New York bred's making an impression on the Breeders' Cup this year. Mind Your Biscuits, of course, the leading New York bred of all time, one of the favorites in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Highway Star has banked $1.2 million, most of that coming, I would say, against restricted company. But at the same time, Kate, it just goes to show you the New York bred program has really taken a step up. Lots of purses to be earned, lots of restricted races, and horses that can step out in an open company and make a serious impact. This is a horse that doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of natural speed from the gate compared to some of the others, so she should be able to sit an advantageous stalking trip. It's just a matter of if she can keep up late.
You wouldn't know it for looking at her now. She looks pretty sharp.
She does, right. Good point.
Another Filly and Mare sprinter to look at, gold, I believe. There's Miss Sunset. Miss Sunset just chilling. Now, when you
hanging out with the crowd, she could be signing autographs.
What a thrill for the people standing there as well.
Yeah.
On the apron, or I should say on the backside, just surrounding the track on the outside fence. That little race fan doesn't know what excitement he might be looking at a future champion. And she seems to enjoy it, too, looking at the people and taking it all in. It's a little unusual to see that calm a demeanor for a Breeders' Cup horse on a chilly morning like this, but it's got to be viewed as a positive sign. And maybe she's a people horse.
Yeah, they know their horses. I mean, there's a lot of horses. There's no way you could do what she's doing right now, but Miss Sunset's personality is obviously a very kind one and a great thrill for the people. And you can see, Caton, and I know in our camera shots we've seen these horses train. There's a lot of people back there today that are really enjoying the atmosphere, enjoying seeing these Breeders' Cup horses train. And if you're a race fan, what a treat.
Now, Miss Sunset possesses a lot of early speed. She has been successful at the 7 furlong distance. Her last race wasn't her best when she traveled to Keeneland. She was beaten as the favorite by Golden Mischief, but she had a win at Del Mar in a little restricted stakes race. She was second to the likely favorite Marley's Freedom. She was second beaten just a nose at Keeneland in the Madison in the spring to Finley's Lucky Charm. And again, you can see, I think that the rider's really wanting to make sure that she has an opportunity to really see everything carefully, and not while she's in forward motion, but rather while she's just standing still and can take it in and process the information. That, or it's a friendly exercise rider who wants to chat with everybody out there, and the horse doesn't seem to mind at all. If she got antsy, he wouldn't make her stand, and you can see he lets her go when she seems like she's had enough. But I am impressed with her demeanor. She's really pretty, too, with that white face and her 4 white bandages, again, primarily protective. And now she's kind of going about her business, and it seems like she knows the difference.
Yeah, it seems like she knows what her job is, as a lot of these professionals do. Miss Sunset, a 4-year-old filly with 10 wins from 19 starts. And I thought that TCA was a little bit of a funny race. She was really bet down to 8-5 in what I thought was a lot more wide-open race than that. She ran 4th. She got beat a length and a quarter, but she galloped out in front. I thought maybe blinkers. But then again, adding blinkers for a Breeders' Cup race, a lot of trainers probably would shy away from doing that. She's capable, but she's drawn inside, Kate, and she draws post position number 2 with a lot of other speed horses outside of her. Kent DeSormo is going to have to make some early decisions with her.
And there is Jaywalk for trainer John Service. Is it John
Speed.
or Jason?
This one's John. Jason's represented.
The brothers
as well.
are represented as well.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of family connections in this year's Breeders' Cup, I think more than I ever remember. I mean, racing is a family business, and you'll find a lot of father-sons or people that are related to others that are involved in the business. But I can't think of too many years where we've had quite as many brothers, father-sons, all competing in the same Breeders' Cup. It's kind of a neat dimension to it. Brothers Jason and John, and then you've got, of course, Mark Cassie and his son Norm. So I enjoy kind of that type of camaraderie/rivalry at the same time, and it truly is a family business.
She's bouncing over the track here. Jaywalk, this is the first look that we've gotten of her, I believe. She was really impressive in the Frisette. She broke a little bit slowly. She rushed up and made the lead that day. They went fast up front early, 45 and change, finished out 34-2 over that one-turn mile at Beaumont, off a little bit of a layoff, and she responded on cue. She won as much the best. This is a nice filly who has improved with every start. And again, coming into this race the right way for John Service, probably most famous, obviously, for his Kentucky Derby win with Smarty Joe.
Now, here's a different change of pace, so to speak. A, she's kind of doing a nice open gallop, but B, the exercise rider tends to ride with a little bit longer hold of her and also a longer stirrup iron. Just a personal preference and how they can feel most effective on their horses and most secure. But boy, she has a nice roundness and fluidity to her stride as well, and you can tell she's full of energy. She's coming off 3 consecutive wins. One was on a muddy track sprinting, one was on a fast track at Delaware sprinting, and one was in the 1 mile Frisette at Belmont Park. So she has a high cruising speed, and I think you can kind of see that. I believe probably John's style is well suited to that type of horse, which is to say a lot of long, steady building stamina type miles
Catherine
underneath their
Sophia
horses.
comes to mind,
Catherine
yep.
Sophia was very similar. Smarty Jones, very strong horse who would take a lot of training, and it looks like she is flourishing with it.
Let's take a look at Pavel. Doug O'Neill with 5 Breeders' Cup
for
wins
all the horsemen,
on his resume. And Pavel, a Grade 1 winner here at Churchill Downs, earned his way into the Breeders' Cup Classic by winning the Stephen Foster here in June. That was a very, very warm night, and a lot of horses did not bring their A games in that particular event, but Pavel certainly did. Came back and ran a distant second in the Pacific Classic behind Accelerate, and ran well that day. Accelerate was simply much the best. Gave him a little bit of time off by design, and comes into this Breeders' Cup Classic a fresh horse.
Yeah, and a happy horse. If his gallop here is any indication, striding out nicely. See the tail streaming behind him. He looks a picture, doesn't he? Now, Doug O'Neill will frequently bring his horses out a little later than is typical from a lot of big barns. Of course, he has to stagger them throughout the morning, but he's not afraid to work a horse when the other horses have trained over the track. And I kind of wonder if that's a throwback to Jack Van Berg, because Jack Van Berg always used to say he felt it was better a little later in the day to breeze a horse, not super late, but when the track had been worked versus when it was right after a break, first after break, before there were any hoof prints. So personal style for these individual trainers.
Yeah, that's cool. We've gotten to see a lot of that over the course of the last several mornings, different trainers doing things different ways, all pointing towards success. Santa Monica, one of 5 horses, Caton, in the, we'll call it the Chad Brown filly in their turf. One of his horses here, not the high-profile horse that Sister Charlie or 4 Stars Crook is, well-drawn, potentially for her on the outside because she has some tactical speed but doesn't need to be on the lead. Jose Ortiz should be able to make a trip. But again, she's going to have to step it up a little bit off of recent performances to compete with the upper echelon horses in here. But Chad thinks enough of her to give her a chance.
This is live, and Joe, you can see the rider actually has his feet out of the irons because I think she might be a little tough, and he likes to ride short. But when you're going slow and they're maybe going to buck or play or be hard to manage, he doesn't want his irons that high, and he'll put his feet in the irons when they turn around. But in the meantime, as she's going that little jog, he's going to wait. And you can see she looks to me like she could be a little bit of a handful.
Yeah, she's a handful. European import for Chad Brown, who has progressed nicely in her career, now 5-year-old mare, but she's definitely feeling good on this
very fresh,
cool morning in Louisville.
I can't tell. It looks like she might have just a little bit of sweat on her neck. If that is the case, some of, especially the fillies, but some of the horses in general, may have started to grow winter coats. Mm-hmm. And if they do that, they're going to get warm as they start to do exercise, no matter how cold the temperatures. So I wouldn't look at it as a negative. It's just a sign that maybe she has a little bit longer coat. Now, if she would continue to do it and she were clipped or something, or if it were to get worse, then maybe it'd be something that you'd think about from a handicapper's perspective. Some of the horses, though, do tend to run a little bit hotter than others and just sweat a little bit more.
Very true. And obviously this is her first look at the surroundings here at Churchill Downs as well. She's got a couple of more days to get acclimated. Here's a Raving Beauty, a big, strong, good-looking gray. She's been successful at a mile, but she will be racing in the filly and mare turf. Talked about Chad Brown having 5 of them. This is one of them. Got a great resume.
Is that a quintet?
It is a quintet.
It's a quintet. Raving Beauty is has a little speed. She showed it when she won the First Lady. She's tactical. She doesn't have to have the lead, but she's usually in that first flight of horses versus coming from the rear of the pack. But the distance, a little test for her at this stage in this group, although she overseas ran at 1.25 miles and finished second. But since she's come to the United States, she hasn't run past 1 1/8 miles. She's a beautiful filly, though. I know where she got her name. And it has that classic European pedigree by Master Craftsman. She's out of German/Irish mare, High Chaparral, the sire of the dam, was a German mare, and Raving Beauty has really been very consistent. She's really only had one off race since coming to the United States at Saratoga in the Boston Spa, where she was the beaten favorite. She just ran flat to me.
She was flat that day. She was, and I was surprised. She showed that good speed and won the First Lady wire to wire, because the race before the Boston Spa, the Diana, she was 5-2 against Sister Charlie. She had a rail trip. She was absolutely loaded on the turn. She had the check. She was in tight in the stretch. She did not get a fair shot that day. And then going into the Boston Spa, I thought she was squarely the horse to beat, flat, but then obviously comes back and wins the First Lady over a mile. But Chad elects for the filly and mare Turf over the Breeders' Cup Mile, where she would have had to have faced the boys. I'm sure there were some discussions as to what would be the best race for her.
Well, she has a very fluid way of traveling on the dirt for a turf filly, and a very pretty action as well. The rider has done a great job of taking all that energy that we saw before she turned around and putting it to good use, as she gets a lot out of this gallop, gets to stretch her legs, gets to open her airway, but at the same time, she's very controlled. She's kind of picking it up as she goes. You saw that lead change right there, and the rider actually put more slack in the reins and just kind of pushed a little bit on the neck, and she did it like clockwork.
You can see that high knee action with her, too. You can tell that she's a turf horse. Although she has an interesting build, she's certainly filled out and not quite as athletic looking as a lot of the grass horses we see. That's kind of why maybe she's a little bit of a tweener, Kate, between the mile and an eighth, stretching her out to a little bit further distance in the filly and mare Turf. Wildcat, very consistent. Chad Brown, dirt horse. Breeders' Cup Distaff, the Longines Breeders' Cup Distaff. Distant third behind Abel Tasman and a late unfortunately not making the Breeders' Cup Distaff, but Abel Tasman is, and she'll be one of the favorites. Came back and won the Beldame easily, Caton, but that was a watered-down Grade 1 field. She kind of is what she is. I don't think she's in the upper echelon of this year's Distaff, but can definitely get a piece of it.
She's 9 for 11 lifetime. I mean, it's
yeah,
a pretty stellar resume. Her last win in the Beldame was a good one. She did pretty easily. She was in hand at the end. This is a different group of horses for sure. Only 3 starts in the United States, so it's kind of hard to tell where she fits with the U.S. competition. She was well beaten by Abel Tasman. It was only her second start here, so I'm kind of on the fence with her. I'm not sold on her, but at the same time, I'm willing to consider the possibility, because she does seem to be a horse that's improving since she got here and got under Chad Brown's care, and she was capable of stringing together some very nice runs against the best in Chile. It's just, how does that translate to the form here against the best?
Yeah, I'll say this. I mean, she was bet right into the teeth of Abel Tasman and a late, and I was like, wow, Wildcat's 4-1 against Abel Tasman and a late, and then, she got beat 10 lengths. But then she came back, like you said, Kate, and took a big step forward. And, don't be fooled. That's a confidence booster when a horse can do what she did in her last start and win going away. She's like, oh, yeah, I can do this. I can compete, with these kinds of horses at this level. And, confidence riding high into this race. Maybe she's got another big step forward in her, but she's going to have to.
There she is, all done with her work. She'll go back to the barn. You see someone leading her back to the track, back to the barn, just to make sure that nothing goes amiss. She isn't startled by anything, doesn't step on herself as she goes back to the barn. She'll be probably sponged off and then walked around till she's cool. Meanwhile, others going out, including World of Trouble, for the turf sprint. And right off the bat, Joe, there's where you see a real contrast in the sprinters versus the turf fillies that we just saw. I mean, World of Trouble's probably got twice the girth and twice the chest. I mean, twice as wide, so to speak.
Yeah, this is a horse that was marginally on the Triple Crown Trail earlier this year. Ran in the Tampa Bay Derby, ran third behind Quip, and then they just said, you know what, this is a sprinter. Jason Service knew that, wanted to take a shot in the Tampa Bay Derby, and the horse ran well. Disappointing fourth in the Woody Stevens as the favorite, and then has won 2 races in a row on the turf in the Quick Call, and then in the Allied Forces, most recently at Belmont. Post position number 11, maybe not ideal necessarily for him, but he's got good natural speed, and he might just be able to sit and, take over off the turn, I think he's very dangerous.
And this is World of Trouble for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, trained by Jason Service. So this is Jason's runner. Yep. 4 for 7 lifetime. And, yeah, I agree with everything you said. This is a very, very quick horse, very strong horse. And what I love about his demeanor on the track is that though he is fast, you don't see it. He's calm right now. That's kind of a sign of a really smart horse that knows when to turn it on and shut it off. And if they'll come out on the track and they'll walk flat-footed and be calm and stand like this, and they're not a bundle of pent-up energy ready to explode, but they possess the natural speed that they're capable of making the lead in almost every one of their starts, no matter how fast everybody's running, that's a really good horse. And he does seem pretty calm.
The juvenile sprint's been a mixed bag, Kate, between speed horses, stalkers, deep closers. 5.5 furlongs this year at Churchill Downs may help some of those horses that like to come from a little bit further out of it. This horse is going to be in the thick of the battle from go to woe, and, making a real nice first appearance here at Churchill Downs.
Now, we don't see too many workers, at least in North America, but you will see some old school horsemen and some Europeans that will do a little something through the stretch. This is Soldier's Call, and it happened just a couple minutes ago. Breezing or blowing out down the lane in preparation for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. You can see just a little, it's just a little something to open up his air, to give him an opportunity to stretch his legs. Not a lot. It's usually a short distance. That's why we say through the stretch. It might be quarter mile, might be 3/8 of a mile type of blowout. I just don't see trainers in America doing that quite as often as they used to, but it used to be routine. And some trainers would even do it the day before the race or even the morning of the race, Joe. I know some trainers, Alan Jerkins among them, would blow them out the same day that they'd run. It kind of takes the edge off a little bit and puts them very sharp and in a good frame of mind to go over to the paddock. But, again, styles change, and you just don't see it very often. In the case of Soldier's Call, we're several days out from the race still, and there's plenty of time. It wasn't very fast. It really wasn't for speed. It was more just to let him do a little something.
This horse is 9-2 in Mike Battaglia's morning line and is the international favorite. If you look online, oddscheckers.com is the website that I use. 3-1 international favorite. This is the first time we're ever running this race. It's the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, and quite a few Americans that we're familiar with, quite a few Europeans. It's the launch race of Breeders' Cup on Future Stars Friday. And a very intriguing betting race based on what we've seen international odds-wise and also morning line odds-wise, and a matchup, so to speak, between a lot of these young European horses and a lot of the young American horses that don't want to go 2 turns on the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and they get their first opportunity to sprint in a Breeders' Cup race on grass this year.
Let's take a look at the field for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We're going to take a look at B Squared.
Take a look at him momentarily.
He's out on the track right now.
Let's digest this field here, Kate.
He's in post position number 3. Mario Gutierrez for Doug O'Neill, 20-1 on the morning line. He was second beaten just ahead last out, and last victory came in a restricted stake at Santa Anita, going 3/4 of a mile, same distance as the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Roy H. and Imperial Hint expected to take a lot of money. Roy H. because of his victory last year, Imperial Hint because of coming close last year and everything else he's done since.
This is a pretty draw because you got Whitmore on the inside. Ron Moquette's fine with that. Promises Fulfilled, the speed on the inside, he's going to go. Imperial Hint is going to be able to sit right side or outside of Promises Fulfilled, and Roy H., the defending champion, is going to have a clear shot from the outside, as is Limousine Liberal, horses that like to stalk a couple of lengths off the pace. I think it's Roy H. against the horse that he beat last year, who ran second for Imperial Hint. But here's B Squared, and Doug O'Neill. We talked about him winning 5 Breeders' Cup races, and we get our first look at B Squared this morning.
B Squared's just 1 for 10 this year, but he's been first or second in 10 of 21 starts lifetime. So he too is a very consistent animal. Redham Racing.
Doug won this race in 2006 with Thor's Echo. And again, we talked about the turf sprint, Caton, and how the race is won. Breeders' Cup Dirt Sprint, 6 speed horses or pressers, 6 stalkers. Deep closers don't do great in this race. Only 3 of them have won it over the course of the 15 editions. So B Squared, a horse that likes to come from a little bit out of it, cutting back from longer races as well.
He just switched onto his left lead there through the turn, which is where he's supposed to. He's pretty relaxed through this gallop, but nice energy, covering the ground fine, attentive to everything. And if he's true to Doug O'Neill's style, he'll kind of pick it up as he goes along.
Getting to see a lot of the horses for the Breeders' Cup from different categories. B Squared, one of 9 horses, not a full field for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Caton, Twin Spires Breeders' Cup Sprint, race number 7 on Saturday's card.
Let's check in with Gabby. What you got, Gabby?
Well, Caton here with Ron Lombardi with Mr. Amore Stables, who've got 2 horses running on Breeders' Cup weekend, but one of them being Firenze Fire. And this is actually a homebred for you, Ron. And just talk about this horse and how special it is for him to be competing on the biggest stage.
It's unbelievable. I claimed the mare a few years back for 16. She had run 2 races and then she couldn't race anymore. So I had her turned out on the farm and decided I needed to do something with her. And I said, you know what? She was down in Florida. I didn't want to spend a lot of money because everyone said, well, with her bloodlines, we don't know if we should, should you breed her or not. And I decided to go forward and selected Poseidon's Warrior. And here we are for a few $1,000s, with the big boys.
Well, what's the ride been like? Because he clearly showed so much talent, really in an important time in 3-year-old prep races. So you had to run him or needed to run him in the Kentucky Derby. But what has the ride been like with this horse, even earlier in his 3-year-old campaign?
It's been fantastic. When he won the Sanford up at Saratoga and then the Champaign, we said, okay, we have something here. And made the decision to stay in New York and trying to get to the Derby from there. And a lot of people question, does he have the stamina and the pedigree to go the distance? And everything he had shown, he was right there. And it was something that I had to do. I mean, one thing I always wanted to do is run in the Kentucky Derby, and he got me there. And he had a great showing. I mean, he finished 11th. But he was in the top 5 or 6 for until the top of the stretch, and it was just truly an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, sometimes it just leaves you speechless when you get to run a horse in the Kentucky Derby, right?
It was unbelievable. Anybody who has that opportunity to make it to the Kentucky Derby, you have to take it.
Well, he came back with a crescendo, so to speak, in the Dwyer, a 9-length victory, I think a 107 Beyer speed figure in that race. What were your thoughts when he crossed the finish line that day?
It was an amazing day, and hopefully we can get that this Saturday. But before the race, I said to Irad, I said, you worried about anybody? He goes, I know what I have. I'm not worried about anything. And I had no idea what he was talking about, but he had actually breezed the horse a couple times that week, so he knew the horse was ready to go, and it was an amazing race.
What's been the communication like with Jason Service and how Firenze Fire is coming into this weekend?
He's doing fantastic. Jason loves, we had a choice between the sprint and the mile. And it's something we made the decision on Saturday that we were going to do the mile. And it was really looking at the competition. And, the one turn is his forte. And he's done great at that, so we decided to go with the mile. The one thing, I also have Vision Perfect in the turf sprint, so I'm running in race 4 and 5, so I don't even get a break. But I'll take it any day of the week.
Well, as an owner, is that sometimes a good thing, just to go pop, get them out of the way so that you don't have to wait all day and that anticipation's building?
Well, hopefully we'll be celebrating one way or the other, but it's good. It'll be a nice day. Like I say, we'll have it done early. I think we race at like 12:38 and 1:16. So 1:30, we'll be ready to have fun.
Oh, Vision Perfect. He's been very impressive really throughout his career. I think he's finished in the money 15 out of 30 starts or something like that. What is it like to just have a horse that constantly, impresses you and constantly tries?
He's a gamer, and I claimed him back in June of last year, and I claimed him to fill the shoes of Tight End Touchdown, who ran in the turf sprint in 2013 and 14. And, for the first 5-6 months, he wasn't doing much, and then all of a sudden, he just blossomed, and he's been a real treat.
Well, you were talking about the experience leading into the Kentucky Derby. What is the experience like leading into the Breeders' Cup, especially with two horses?
It's truly exciting. I mean, I look at it, the Kentucky Derby is the Super Bowl. The Breeders' Cup is the Olympics, because you have all the best horses in all different conditions and all different types of races. And they do a great job here, and it's just amazing. I've been fortunate to be out at Santa Anita twice, Del Mar, and now here, and it's really looking forward to it.
Now, obviously, Firenze Fire is a homebred. I believe you claimed, as you just mentioned, Vision Perfect. Are you just involved in all facets? Do you claim? Do you buy? Do you breed?
Well, 10 years ago when I got into racing, I said if I could have 3 to 5 horses, I said that'll be amazing. Now I have 65. I have 15 brood mares. I have 10 yearlings. I got 15 in the oven. So it's something I never really anticipated. In fact, yesterday I bought a farm. So who knows?
Congratulations.
Thanks. Well, we have to figure that one out. But that's how it's been for me. As I go along, I figure things out, and it seems to be working. Having Jason as my trainer, I couldn't ask for a better trainer and a better relationship.
Now, does Jason train the majority or all of your horses?
No, Jason trains majority. Kelly Breen also trains. And then Jackie Stuffer up in Finger Lakes does some training for me as well.
All right. Well, what is that? I kind of want to get some insight into the relationship between you and Jason, too, because it seems like a very long-standing, close relationship. Yeah,
Jason and I, from the beginning, we've been together. We got Jason's first stake win together, first Grade 1 win together, first trip to the Breeders' Cup together, first trip to the Derby together, and now we're back with 2. And, the one thing I'm concerned about is in the turf sprint, I'm running against 2 of Jason's other horses. So here I am, he's got 5 running this weekend, which is amazing, and I'm just happy to have 2 of them.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us here this morning and taking the time to talk about your contenders and your life. Good luck with the farm.
Thank you, Gabby.
All right, Kaiten, back to you.
Thank you, Gabby. That is a big part of the excitement. The owners, the breeders having part and parcel, everything that they've dreamed of coming to fruition when they get to the Breeders' Cup. And a very busy man wearing a lot of hats, but enjoying it all as well as part of an ownership team. Breeder from Windstar Farm, Elliot Walden, welcome to Breakfast at Breeders' Cup, and thank you for coming over. I know it's not quite the comfort of the Windstar Fasig-Tipton marquee tent.
It's very nice. So you've got a great view here of the Twin Spires.
We
the
do.
sun is coming up.
You guys have a great view too. I have heard that we have to check out the marquee. That it is spectacular.
I should have brought you all some breakfast, shouldn't I?
We'll come over later.
You bet.
Tell us about Yoshida. You guys had to be really thrilled with his workout and the way he's coming into the Classic.
Yeah, he's doing great, and that's all you can really ask for. Feel like you're in with a chance. But, every time you see him on the screen, I know you've commented a few times this week what a beautiful horse he is, and he really is, and he's a happy horse. That's something that is, Kaiten, as you know, watching him train, you can see if a horse is enjoying his work or not, and he's certainly enjoying what he's doing, and so we're real excited about the opportunity to run him Saturday.
Looks like you'll have some speed in the race. You drew post position number 10, which I would think with that long run into the first turn and your running style is inconsequential. Probably want to keep them in the clear, hope that the fractions are honest, and do the same thing that you did in the Woodward and make that one big run.
Well, and he was in the 1 hole that day, so he caught dirt, which being first time on the dirt, we were a little concerned about. He handled it beautifully. It's interesting, Sean Tugel that works for us told me Sunday Silence, his grandfather, won out of the 10 hole when he won the Kentucky Derby here. So we hope history repeats itself. But, the other thing is that the Woodward was a race that was very impressive to beat 14 horses. 3 of them have come back and won. So that race, while at the time there's been some guys kind of comment on that race not being quite as good, I just wanted to remind you, Joe, that 3 of them have won. Out of that race.
One here.
Seeking the Soul. I think Discreet Lover won the Jockey Club. And then Leo Frick won the Fayette.
I think I said that before Leo Frick won. Maybe not.
Ever changing, but I'm curious, Elliot, going into the Woodward, I know you guys are never afraid to take a chance, especially when a horse is doing well and especially when you have a trainer like Bill Mott who's saying that maybe this is something to give a shot to, and it's worked out pretty well for you in the past. Did you think that he was going to be as effective on the dirt as he was on the turf?
Well, you never know until you run him, as Bill said, going into the Woodward. But, when we bought him in Japan. And the thing that struck me was his mother won a grade 1 at Saratoga. Hilda's Passion won the ballerina by many on the dirt. He is a grandson of Sunday Silence, who was a dirt horse. So when we bought him, we had the anticipation that we would bring him back here, be a unique opportunity for breeders to breed to him down the road if he were a good horse, and that he would dirt. And so we were always looking for the opportunity. But then you get into a rhythm. He wins a grade 1 on the turf. It's hard to mess with what's not broken. And so he kept running on the grass, but we always were waiting for the time that it would suit to do it. And so I'm glad we did, and I'm glad we're in the Classic on Saturday.
Now, leading up to the Breeders' Cup, did the workout show. You were a guest with me during that time period, doing the Breeders' Cup workout show. But in between, it was Justify, and he had his own show as he was getting prepared for the Triple Crown. A lot of racing fans out there watching from all over the world on Twitter, Facebook, Breeders' Cup website. They want to know how Justify's doing.
Justify's doing great. I saw him a couple of weeks ago at Ashford, and he's doing amazing. We've got 12 mares booked to him to go to him this year. Can't wait to see his babies next year, and he's just amazing. I know that, like us, we would rather see him here this weekend. But the timing of what he needed, we needed 60 days off. It just wasn't going to happen for this year, and so we did the right thing and had to retire him. But, what could have been possibly with Justify here, it would have obviously added to the increase. But there's so many good horses here. Enable, Roaring Lion from Europe. It's such a global event, and it's one opportunity that we have in this game from a Breeders' Cup perspective, to bring, I think there's 40 some odd horses from Europe here. So it truly is a world championship.
And I know there's disappointment in not having Justify in the Breeders' Cup Classic, as there would be any year that you have a horse who did what he did not be there. How do you rate this year's field in its own right? Because and Gabby has been talking about this. I've talked about this a little bit, Joe, as well, that from both a handicapping standpoint but a pure racing fan standpoint, this is a fascinating field of depth and a lot of complexities with horses coming in so many different avenues.
Yeah, you've got a good 3-year-old and Catholic boy. You've got the pro tem leader of the older division now in Accelerate from the West Coast. You've got a lot of different moving parts coming together. You even got Mendelssohn coming over here for the 5th global trip from Ireland. It is a fascinating group, and I think it's very deep from top to bottom. So we're just hopeful that Yoshida, I think he's probably 4th, 5th choice, something like that, around 8 or 10 to 1, I would imagine. And, I think he's in with a chance.
Yoshida's a horse, obviously, who has proven his worth both on turf and dirt. A very different situation when you're dealing with young horses, but you've got another horse that you'll have a keen interest in on the card. Very different from Yoshida as far as experience, but tell us about Bolton.
Yeah, really pleased with his first race, Kate, and he won a stake at Gulfstream. We couldn't get him in a maiden race down there, and it just worked out that Todd said, you know what, there's 6 horses in this stake, and he says, I think he's talented, so let's try it, and he won by 6. So I don't know what the turf course is going to be like here with the rain that's predicted on Thursday versus a turf course at Gulfstream. That would be one concern. But he's fast. I think he drew very well with the 5-hole in a 12-horse field. I think 5's perfect because it allows him to – he's fast, so he'll be out pretty close to the lead, and we'll see what happens. We're excited. Only having run him once, it's hard to really know, but couldn't be more pleased with his first race, and I think it was an 86 buyer number, so it's one of the fastest in the field.
I watched that replay. He did everything right.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah.
We won't talk too much about selections yet. Got to talk about Audible. I mean, obviously – Justify retired, but Audible ran a monster race in the Kentucky Derby in his own right. He's got his own fan club too, and racing fans will be happy to know that he's coming back.
He's back. He's going to run on the undercard here, going 7 furlongs, and it's a nice step to 6 weeks to the Harlan's Holiday and 6 weeks to the Pegasus. So that's what we're looking at with Audible. 7 furlongs, we're going to see if he's versatile enough to get that done, because obviously when you win a grade 1 at a mile and an eighth like the Florida Derby, we're going to find out about 7/8. But he's training really well, and Todd circled this race to come back in.
Elliot, it's always a pleasure to see you. We want to wish you good luck with all your runners and all the interests. And next time, bring us breakfast.
All right, I will. Well, thanks for what you all do. It's great that you all give people across the globe an opportunity to see what's going on here in Louisville.
Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Guys, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, the training is letting up for just a little while, but stick around. We're going to have Europeans on the track, and we're going to check in with Fanny Salmon for a European report, plus much more from breakfast at the Breeders' Cup.
It's the defining event of the horse racing season.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic,
where the world's greatest thoroughbreds battle it out. In the richest weekend in horse racing.
They're into the stretch.
At the Breeders' Cup World Championships.
Gun runners on top of the world.
The Breeders' Cup this weekend on NBC and NBCSN.
Our win program. It was a big, big day. That's the finest breeding program in Central Kentucky.
Well, back here with Fanny Salmon, our international reporter, the eyes, the ears, the everything for the international horses. And Fanny, we've things have picked up a bit in terms of the international flavor. And this morning, we actually saw Soldier's Call take to the track. Nice little blowout down the lane. What could you tell us about that?
Well, he's a horse I really, really like, and I wanted to see how he was doing after his incredible run in the Prix de l'Abbé. You know, it's really rare to see a 2-year-old perform that well and look eye to eye with its elders in the Prix de l'Abbé against some of Europeans' best sprinters. Of course, he had the weight advantage, but he led the whole way and finished really well as third. So I was wondering how much that effort took out of him. And this is my second day watching him, and he doesn't look the worse for it.
In terms of horses and how they come over and judging by how they do their first day, their second day, their third day on the track, what are you looking for and what kind of changes are you looking for?
Well, first of all, it depends on the horses, because horses can be different. So it's not the same all the time, but you want to make sure that their coat is not too dull. You want to see a little, I want to say spark in the eye, maybe putting it a bit too much in it. But you want to see them alert, and he didn't look like he lost weight. He was happy and prancing, even coming out of his little breeze. I didn't see him well because we were here, but I'm looking forward to seeing that footage again. And what I really like about him too is that he drew post 3. He's going to be reunited with his jockey Oisin Murphin. He's the up-and-coming rider in Europe, and after the Abbey, it's almost like he's dropping back in class. He's going to only have 2-year-olds to compete with.
Right, so getting maybe a little bit of a class relief. But you were out earlier today back at the quarantine barn to take a little bit of a closer look of the Aidan O'Brien shippers. Shipped in 15 yesterday, and you said, talk about the observations that you made, because we were talking about it off air, and it's pretty interesting how the horses have been trained.
It's very interesting, and we're lucky this year because I didn't go into the quarantine. That would be absolutely forbidden, and I want my credentials credential revoked. But we're lucky this year that the screens are actually a little bit more see-through than usual. And I was just there looking at all of Aiden's horses tacked and ridden inside the barn. They were being walked in the shed row for about half an hour. And it's almost like a mini yard. Some European trainers would just, work a lifetime to hope to have 15 plus of these horses under their care. And for the Ballydoyle Coolmore crew, it's almost business as usual. I said 15 plus because there's a plus one in the party. 16 horses actually got on the plane. Seahenge, I think he was scheduled to maybe run on Sunday. I'm not sure if that will happen, but he's Mendelssohn's traveling buddy, and he took the trip with him. And they hang out together. And
not to be forgotten.
Not to be forgotten, because we want to make sure that Mendelssohn travels well. And of course, we won't see them on the track until Thursday morning, but we're really looking forward to that.
Kind of like the Imperial March or some sort of soldier march within the shed row this morning, right?
The Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly. Also wanted to talk and pick your brain about Enable. We saw her do very light training yesterday, just jogged in the chute. What can we expect from her today, and what are you going to be paying attention to?
Well, she's going to go on the turf, so I'm going to try and get a good position on the other side to get a good look at her. And I think she's just such a professional. You want to see that she's relaxed, basically, because she knows what she's doing. We had a nice chat with her exercise rider, Imran, yesterday, and he said she's such a pro that she makes their job easy when it's all a matter of making sure that she doesn't go off on them. Because sometimes she's just very keen. She loves her job and she wants to keep going. And there's been a lot of that this year with her not being able to go as early and as often as she wanted to.
And just to take note, the video that we're showing you right now is video of her training yesterday on the track. She will be taking to the turf around 9:30 today, as Fanny mentioned. What do you think of her? Last question here. At even money on the morning line, I mean, she looks like a standout, at least on her form. I know you might be biased, but do you think that, or do you think that it is a little bit risky at even money?
Are you asking me as a racing fan or as a bettor? Because I think I'm not the best bettor, but if I were to invest some money, you obviously would probably have to go against her. At even money, a race is never run, and you have to go look for value. There might be some value in other horses. I really like Valgeist in that race, and actually Talismanic. I saw him walking back yesterday, and he looked better. I thought that he was walking in, and I had a chat with the traveling lad, Richard Lambert, and he told me that the horse had been cooped up. Both of them had been, inside since Friday, and they were just so eager to get out that they actually were kind of sighing of relief and starting to feel good again. So yeah,
so that they could get out and stretch their legs. Do you
as a bettor, I would I really like Aiden's filly in that race, and we talked yesterday about how Aiden's horses are overcoming a bug, and I really like her. I think she's just peaking at the right time, and we know about Aiden bringing filly with weight advantage in that turf race. I remember found not forgetting that. So she's probably going to be a good value.
Fanny, thank you so much once again for joining us today. We'll be looking forward to getting your insight in the final couple of days on this morning show as well. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. Enable, we were talking about her being even money, guys. She definitely brings a lot of star power. But what do you think from a betting standpoint?
Well, rather than us talk about betting standpoints, we're going to get an expert, someone who's actually playing in the BCBC. But a reminder to everybody about the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. You do have a chance still to qualify for the 2018 Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. Horseplayers.com is the place to go. There are qualifiers taking place on Wednesday as well as Thursday. And remember, this year you can play the BCBC live at Churchill Downs, at Gulfstream Park, at Monmouth, Santa Anita, and at TwinSpires.com. Just go to horseplayers.com for a full list of the details, those last chance qualifiers, and everything else you need to know as we welcome to the set James Metzger, one of those competing in the BCBC. This will be the fifth time for you. Welcome, and congratulations on qualifying 2 qualifiers. Got you here. That's a pretty big accomplishment.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
This is kind of exciting time for everybody. We get caught up in watching the horses work out and all the preparations and all. But I know the preparations for you probably started a lot longer ago than just this week. Tell us a little about the process as you're getting ready for this contest.
Yeah, so as soon as the pre-entries came out, I just started, searching through everyone, and especially the ones I've never heard of, the ones coming from Europe, just to get some familiarity. So when the actual entries came out, I'd have a sense of who's in the race.
James, you're from Louisville.
Correct.
You don't have to travel like a lot of these other horse players do. You get to sleep in your own bed. There's some comfort in that. A lot of preparation that goes on, like you mentioned. But outside of like going through the pre-entries, is it replay watching? Is it speed figures? Is it pace? I mean, probably a little bit of all of that. But what's your focus?
It is all of that. I mean, the first thing I like to look at is pace, just to give me an idea of what type of horses I'm going to be, looking for ideally in the race. And once I do, once I have 2 or 3 horses I'm interested in, I'll definitely go through all their replays and dig deeper into their pedigree and everything like that.
We've asked each of our BCBC tournament players that are joining us this week to kind of zero in on a few horses they may be focusing in on. Understood that game time, you may change your mind or change your plays, but we'll start with Reflect in the Alcibiades.
Yeah.
And what is significant about this horse for you, or this particular prep race?
Right. So I really liked Reflect. There's a ton of speed in that race, and I thought that she'd, get a great pace setup. Watching her Alcibiades, I thought she ran really well. If you noticed around the turn, she's, I guess now we're in the stretch. And she runs strongly after Restless Rider, and she actually gallops out in front toward the end. So I thought that, the long stretch of Churchill would actually help her, if anything. But earlier on in the race, she actually was quite rank, and it was her first time going 2 turns. So I thought that, that experience may help her out a lot.
So the fact that she was rank and that she made up the ground made her a more significant player than perhaps the horse that was the winner. That's the key, looking for something less obvious and maybe finding a different way to look at things than the others
exactly.
might be.
Because, the idea is to outwork everyone else, right? Because if I hadn't watched the replay, I would have thought, okay, she's just a few lengths worse than the winner, but maybe she actually has some excuse in that race.
4 Stars Crook, the next horse that you gave us to look at. Talk about that one.
So, 4 Star Crook, I think the sort of overwhelming factor in the turf races this weekend is the weather, right? It's going to storm supposedly all day, Wednesday and Thursday. So it's going to be a really soft turf course, and we know she loves it. And I'm not, especially, some of the Americans probably won't love it as much. So I think that gives her a huge edge in the race. And here's I guess it's the Flower Bowl, and which had a very, very boggy course that day, and she just comes flying at the end. And, it's not like she's grinding either. I think she closed through in 22-3 in the stretch, which over that type of track is, really impressive.
Do you find that the form from Belmont Park transfers as far as turf racing is concerned? Because different turf courses, and obviously depending on how much moisture we get will be a key factor, but in general, do you feel the form carries over?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think probably Belmont is probably the least like any other turf course in the country, just because of, it's obviously huge and it's just very different. But she's run well elsewhere. And actually, I think in 2015, when the last time the Breeders' Cup was here, Chad won with Stephanie's Kitten up there, and she ran down here. So, I don't think it's the most relatable, but it's similar.
Now, Scott Carson was on yesterday, and he liked Glorious Empire. You're on today. You like Glorious Empire. We need to let people know that this is a $10,000 contest. $2,500 goes into the prize pool. You got to bet $7,500.
Right.
Not only do you have to bet $7,500, you got to bet it on 2 tickets. So you're going to have some options. Let's talk about Glorious Empire.
Okay.
Again, soft ground, speed, good form. Tell us what you like about him.
So Glorious Empire is a little sentimental for me. I won more on him than any horse ever, both times this summer at Saratoga. So I'm trying not to be biased. But, he's clearly just a different horse now, and he's a different horse when he can relax early. And he loves to be on the lead. And, these 3 races where he's made an easy lead, he's just run away from them. So, I don't think the soft ground's going to be great for him. This is the Sword Dancer where it was firmer ground, and they really were never going to catch him. The race before that in the Bowling Green was softer ground, and while he still won, I mean, he won in a dead heat with Channel Maker. So I think the firmer the ground, the better for him, but, you know, depending on how much they ignore him early, I think he has a chance no matter what.
And the Stephen Foster race that you wanted to look at?
Sure. Yeah, Pavel, you know, is possibly going to be my pick. I think that's how they pronounce it, right?
We've been debating it. Sometimes it's Pavel, and for a long time it was Pavel. But we'll go with Pavel for now.
I assumed it was Pavel, but every time I hear Doug O'Neill talking about it,
me too.
He says Pavel, so I'm going with him. He knows what he's doing. But yeah, so this is Stephen Foster, and I mean, he's got these long strides. I think he really likes it here, and he likes these, you know, bigger East tracks. I think that's why they keep shipping him out of California. And I thought it was really impressive, you know, how he drew away from them that day. I mean, he really dominated in the Foster. Those were some nice horses behind him, Honorable Duty and Hawakam, and they never had a chance.
And the fact that you win on a track that you're going to be running over here, it's got to give you some confidence, or got to be a plus.
Yeah, and also the fact that he handled the paddock that day, because he's a horse that often, you know, really gets pretty sweaty and, you know, worked up before his races, and he was very calm and relaxed that day, despite it was night racing, so there was, you know, some crazy stuff going on, just like there will be to them, you know, Saturday. So that was very impressive that he handled it all.
Talk about the bankroll. Talk about the fact that you have 2 tickets. Talk about what you're thinking going into it. You just talked about 4 horses that you kind of like, that you may be centering some wagers upon. But like we talked to Scott Carson yesterday, going into it with a game plan, also having the flexibility to call audibles on the fly.
Right. So I like to only bet to win. I don't make any other bets. And part of the reason why is the takeout, but part of the reason I just only want to focus on whom to bet instead of how to bet. Because I think, you know, if you spend time on how to bet, that, you know, it's sort of distracting. So, I mean, if I see someone, you know, if Pavel doesn't look good at all in the paddock this time, for example, and, you know, someone else looks amazing, I'll definitely change my mind. Definitely looking at them is important.
So I know that tournament play can be a humbling experience, much as playing horse racing can be. What short of victory, and obviously that is the goal, that everybody wants to take home the big prize. What will you be satisfied with? What is your goal for this tournament?
You know, I mean, really, I don't focus as much on the result, although I definitely want to win. I think it's more about making the right decisions. I only get upset at myself if I screw something up. For example, I don't remember Oaks Day this year. I don't remember who I was going to bet, but I noticed all of a sudden that there was a late scratch, and they break, and Farrell is like loose on the lead, or Farrell. So I don't want to let a horse who's going to be, you know, 40-1 loose on the lead get off like that. But as long as I don't make mistakes, I'll be happy.
Well, James, we appreciate you taking time out to come in and join us, and sure wish you good luck in the BCBC.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
It's a great atmosphere and a lot of fun, but very pressure-filled as well.
You got to go against this guy, James.
Eddie O's in the contest. He's already qualified, and he is a Sharpie. You have a chance to win $1 million with Eddie O. You just go to breederscup.com/Eddie O to enter now. You can enter now to win a chance at $1 million. Now, it's not quite that simple. Eddie O has to win this year's BCBC, but if he does, one of the lucky fans from this contest will win $1 million. Just enter it, breederscup.com/Eddie O for a chance to win with Etso.
$500 yesterday. It looks like you made a trip to the ATM machine.
Hold on.
Negative $5.
Hold on a second. I'm hoping to turn that into that over the course of Derby Day. We got the next race coming up here, Lafitte. Behavioral Bias and McCracken. I'm going to box up to 6-8. McCracken wins. Behavioral Bias was second.
Eddie Olczyk, you have the winning exacta, guys?
I knew he'd make the comeback. Can't keep
it's his day. I told you.
I get grief from Bailey. Lafitte every once in a while. Randy,
I got your back.
Yeah, Randy, he does. You know what? I'm going to send up an old hockey stick, a wooden one. And either one of you guys get on the line today, don't give me the accolades.
Nice to see the smile, Enzo.
Now everybody wants to know who you like after knocking it out of the park in the last one.
Well, all of a sudden I got big shoulders. I like the 6 horse. I like Proctor's Ledge as well.
Proctor's Ledge to win.
I'm going to box the 5, 6, and 7. I don't think you can throw Justify out.
Justify has won the Kentucky Derby.
For me, I think it is all about Robert Bruce. Everything that I had in my pocket has been wagered on the 10 horse.
Robert Bruce has won the million.
And so likes Almanar in the upcoming Shadwell Turf Mile. Go to breederscup.com/Edio to enter now. Just enter for a chance to win $1 million. If Edio wins this year's Breeders' Cup betting challenge, a lucky fan will win $1 million. Just enter at breederscup.com/Edio for a chance to win with Edzo.
While we wait, the horses to return after the break, and they're still finishing up with the manicuring. We still have some other European horses, I think, that are going to take to the track a little later, particularly on the turf. But we're going to take a focus on the ladies in the distaff. This is, I think, next to the Classic, one of the key races on the card so far as depth and intrigue. For me, of course, a little personal investment with us riding on the Monomoy Girl Camp along with Florent Giroux. And, Joe, you asked me before my thoughts on the outside post for her. In general, I think that the camp was pretty pleased with her drawing to the outside. She's won from the outside in the Kentucky Oaks. She's won some of her biggest races from the outside, but even more importantly, I think that the plan would be, or ideally, she would have a target versus be pressed to go to the front. And if you're inside, particularly if you're down toward the rail, you may not have as many options.
There's not a ton of speed in this race. If there were 5 speed horses to her inside, I'd be a little bit more concerned about her getting hung out to dry on the first turn. There's a long enough run. Maybe the concern is with that outside gate that she breaks outwardly at the start, maybe has to right herself to get collected and get positioned into that first turn. But she's the best horse in the race. Abel Tasman right there with her A game. Blue Prize, another one that I think is going to run a big race. But Monomoy Girl just continues to bring it every time she goes out there, Caton, and she won the Kentucky Oaks on this racetrack. What we've seen the last few days, there's no reason to believe that she's not going to run another big race and perhaps become the 3rd horse to complete the Oaks Distaff double, joining Untappable in 2014 and Ashado in 2004.
She worked on Sunday. She walked on Monday, and now a little jog today. She joins Arklow, Will Call, and Golden Mischief as runners from the Brad Cox barn. And we have a nice look inside at a rising star in the trainer ranks, Brad Cox.
Monomoy Girl digs down deep, and she was dazzling in the Oaks.
This year's Kentucky Oaks win with Monomoy Girl was an emotional one for trainer Brad Cox.
I'm happy for the people around me. At the end of the day, I feel like, I just want to make people proud of what we do, and it's an amazing race to win.
It was a win that meant everything for a trainer who just a few years ago was left with almost nothing when a major ownership group stripped him of his stable of over 40 horses down to only 2.
I felt bad for my kids. They were used to coming to the barn, looking down, seeing a barn full of horses, and then they show up maybe at feed time a couple days later, and it's like, what happened? So it was a knock more so that way than it was any other way. It was just I didn't want to let him down, and I felt like I had.
One step at a time, Cox began rebuilding his stable, starting with hard work and a strategic approach.
We're determined to build back and set short goals, a goal to pick up a horse a week, and I think I looked up 2 or 3 months later, and it kind of worked out that way. We were able to pick up horses and, continue to win some races along the way, and it worked out really well.
With increasing success year after year, Cox has now reached the pinnacle of the horse racing world with a filly any trainer would love to saddle.
She's taught us a lot. She's obviously the best horse we've ever had in our barn, and she does things different. Just everything's a little bit easier to her. She's got a little bit of an attitude to her for sure, and then, I think that comes with a lot of good fillies. They tend to be a little tough to deal with at times.
Monomoy Girl, home on top of the egg barn.
For all the success and joy that comes from having a horse like Monomoy Girl, Cox says it's the hard times that really motivate him.
I'm driven from the fear of failure, and I think that comes from having, a barn full of horses and having most of them ripped away from you or taken away from you. That's a pretty gutless feeling. I'm proud of what our team's accomplished, but not content. No, by no means. Our goal is to try to develop or acquire graded stake horses and win those type of races, and those are the races we're looking to win. Breeders' Cup Day, Kentucky Derby, Oaks Day, stuff like that. Being on the big stage, it's what I feel like is what we're wanting to accomplish.
And they certainly accomplished an awful lot in a relatively short period of time, Joe. And I think what's even more significant about the Cox stable and the operation right now is the fact that with the Breeders' Cup here at Churchill Downs, and the fact that Brad grew up just a stone's throw away from Churchill, right across the street here in a house that still stands, that he often will drive by going to and from the gate. Maybe keeps him a little grounded, remembering exactly where you came from. But he's got hundreds of horses right now, and he's among the top trainers in the country. He's got 4 very good Breeders' Cup chances. And I actually think, along with Monomoy Girl, Golden Mischief is training unbelievably well and might be the now horse in the filly and mare sprint.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Brad's done such a great job. And you come out here in the morning, and yeah, he's got a lot of horses, but he's intimately involved with all of them, works really, really hard. You heard him say that he was humbled by that experience, the fact that he's built himself back up. And when you talk about up-and-coming trainers, and we know his name now, we have for a few years, but he's putting himself in with some of those bigger names like the Bafferts and the Pletchers and the Chad Browns and the Belmonts, et cetera, where he just continues to build his resume.
And it is a family affair for him. His son, 2 sons, in fact, are at the barn on a regular basis and an integral part of the operation. Kathy Riccio working with the stable team as well. His assistant, Georgie, does an incredible job. It's a great team that have seen the results. And a look at the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint finds Golden Mischief in the fray with this group. As a result, she draws post position 5 in a field of 14. Deep field, tough field, Marley's Freedom, probably the horse that most will be talking about prior to the race as far as a top shot. Certainly the connections are there with Bob Baffert and Mike Smith, but she's been very, very solid this season.
There's a lot of horses in this race, Caton, with the same style. Not necessarily pedal to the metal burners, must have the lead kind of horses, but a lot of pace pressers. This is going to be a rider's race. Marley's Freedom drew post position number 13. I don't think that's detrimental to her chances at all because a lot of these horses are going to show speed. She's just going to probably take back and make one big run with Mike Smith, and a big run she has. Might need to try to overcome some traffic difficulties, though. This, to me, is the most fascinating race on Breeders' Cup weekend as far as how the pace scenario is going to play out because, like I said at the top of this, a lot of these horses have the same kind of style.
The track's reopened for training. Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf is the next category that we're going to focus on. And Arthur Kitt, I believe, out on the track right now. Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf is a distance of 1 mile. You see the field drawn there of 14 plus 2 also eligibles. Tracksmith and Order and Law on the also eligible list in that order. Arthur Kitt at 20-1 along the inside. Races with Lasix for his U.S. debut. He is 2 for 4 lifetime with his wins coming in his first start and backing it up in the Chesham Stakes at Ascot.
You saw that field there. Anthony Van Dyke, post position number 14, one of the likely favorites, 4-1 on the morning line for Aidan O'Brien, who's won this race 4 times. In fact, 4 of the last 7, including with Mendelssohn last year. But that post for Anthony Van Dyke, not good. Arthur Kitt, on the other hand, drew the rail.
Yeah, Arthur Kitt has the advantage of, the Euros tend to race less about pace, more about strategy and tactics. And that's not to say you won't see horses like Mendelssohn come from overseas that have natural early speed and that are front runners. But in many cases, the horses are more accustomed to racing with cover. In other words, behind horses and kind of waiting to make their move. So I don't think the inside post is going to be an obstacle at all. Not only is it the shortest way around the track, but on top of it, I think it's kind of a familiar position for a colt like Arthur Kitt, who there you see with his pony taking it all in. He's a lanky sort, isn't he? Kind of a tall drink of water with his ears perked, and you see the piece of equipment that goes over his face, his forehead, and then branches off on either side. That's called a Sherwin. And it was actually made popular, I think, by Seattle Slew years ago when he was successful in his Triple Crown bid. Everybody started using them afterwards, but kind of helps to keep the bit in place without putting any unnecessary pressure anyplace else. It's just a strip of rubber that runs down the front and branches off to either side of the bit.
Yeah, we've seen all different kinds of equipment with the various horses. You've done just a remarkable job explaining to everyone out there, including me, because I've learned a lot being on the show with you the last few days about the equipment. And again, it's a learning process. We talk about this over the course of all of these Breakfast at Breeders' Cup shows. Eventually the trainers learn what their horses need, whether it's a shadow roll, whether it's blinkers, different size cups on the blinkers, cheaters, et cetera, bits, all different kinds of equipment to put their horses in the best position to potentially win or at least run up to their capabilities.
Next up, we'll stick to the turf. Juvenile filly turf, runner winning envelope. And this one is on the also eligible. She's number 16, along with the 15 Pivotina. Chris Block trains daughter of More Than Ready for Lothenbach Stables, 4-length winner of an allowance race on the turf at Churchill. It was a good turf. She also broke her maiden. Her only try in stakes company was in the Arlington, Washington Lassie on synthetics. She was fifth that day. Again, something would have to happen for her to get a shot to run, which is not anything anybody wishes, but there's always a little bit of disappointment from connections who feel they have earned a shot to try or have the horse that could take them there if they don't get the shot to get to run.
$3,000 is what the original owners paid for winning envelope. A private purchase after that maiden win. The Arlington, Washington Lassie did not go well, but that turf debut around 2 turns, and I saw that here at Churchill, was impressive. Obviously, she's on the outside looking in here, but the connections were very pleased with that victory after they bought her privately, and it looks like she does have a future around 2 turns on the grass. But again, $3,000, the original purchase price here.
It just goes to show you, they can come from anywhere, good horses, right? You can have a bargain or you can spend $1 million, and you probably have almost the same shot, not quite, but almost the same shot of ending up with a top runner here. And some of the bargain purchases have made some of the best stories.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen quite a bit of that here. Regally bred horses, homebreds. Kate mentioned, $400,000, $500,000 purchases, $1 million purchases, and then some of the lesser known commodities. Imperial Hint is one of those that we've seen that is just really taken his game to a level that nobody believed was possible. But that's what's one of the great things about horse racing is anything's possible. And we've seen several examples of that leading into the Breeders' Cup.
Sipacan Harbor is up next out on the track for trainer Gary Contessa. She'll be competing in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies at 1 1/16. She drew post position 8 in the field of 10. She was winner of her last 2 starts, broke her maiden by 17 lengths. You rarely see horses win off like that anymore, and we've got a couple juvenile fillies in the same field. Sipacan Harbor broke her maiden by 17 lengths. Serengeti Empress won the Pocahontas by 19.5 lengths. It's kind of crazy, these fillies. She's a daughter of Orb, 2 for 3 lifetime.
Interesting, Kate, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. She won that race off the turf. She beat 4 horses. She did it by 17 lengths. She goes into the spin away. The betting public wasn't impressed. They sent her off at 16-1. It was a contested pace up front. She closed from far, far back, hung 8 wide on the turn, really extended her stride nicely to win. But this is a horse who debuted around 2 turns on turf. Now she's a dirt horse. And after that race, after the spin away, Gary Contessa said, we've made our way into the Breeders' Cup. We're not going to have another race. They could have maybe gone, in a 1-mile race or maybe searched out 2 turns somewhere. But now she's going back to 2 turns against other horses who have been further distances, many of which have been around 2 bends against tougher competition. Do you feel that might be a little bit of a disadvantage to her?
Well, I think in terms of running style and horses adjusting to a distance of ground, that it's got to be a benefit to have experience and know what you're going to encounter. You know, the first time a horse runs long can often be the best for them as far as carrying their speed and momentum, especially if they are distance challenged. I don't know that that's going to be the case as far as distance limitation. Sipican Harbor's by Orb out of a deputy minister mare, so you would think that distance would be right up her alley. And you know, I think in this case, 7 furlongs is kind of a route for a 2-year-old at the time of year that she was running it. So she at least has that prep going for her. Whether or not, though, I do think, long answer to your question, that sure, I think that she would have, I think it would have benefited her, or the connections would feel more sure about how she handles 2 turns had she had the opportunity to run it before. But it is kind of a natural progression at this time of the year, too. The horses that have done it before maybe have an edge. I like that filly, though. I think she's got the pedigree to stretch out. And the fact that she beat Restless Rider, and then Restless Rider came back to win the way she did, tells me that Sipican Harbor might be something pretty special.
Take a look at Well Defined on the track. Certainly has been special in Florida. Caton, winner of 2 of 4 lifetime starts. None more impressive than the 2-turn debut last time when she drew away to win by more than 7 lengths. Again, that was against restricted Florida bred company, but the speed figures tell me that she's pretty fast.
Hey, I'm going to tell you, Well Defined was impressive when he won the Stallion Stakes, the in-reality division. He broke his maiden in June, and then ultimately had a bit of time off before the Stallion Stakes started. He finished second in the 7 furlong affirmed. These are all races that are restricted to horses that are by Florida sires or Florida breds. And he was only a half length behind a pretty nice horse, Garter and Tie, who they had to fend off. That was coming off the layoff at 7 furlongs, the longest he had run. I think he just got a little bit tired. But what was interesting to me was how well he transitioned from the 1 turn to the 2 turns. And he was explosive through the stretch. Looked like he wanted to go around again at odds of 5-1. I think Well Defined definitely has the foundation. And over the years, this Florida Stallion Stakes and the Florida program in general with 2-year-olds has yielded great results in the Breeders' Cup. There haven't been a lot of horses that have had opportunity to run in them, but those that have fared really well.
I want to say Awesome Feather.
Awesome Feather came out of it. He didn't run in the Stallion Stakes, but he ran in South Florida. Holy Bull competed there. It's been a good stepping stone, a good place to get a horse ready and prepared for the Breeders' Cup. There's a look at the field. Mr. Money, I saw school in the paddock the other day for Brett Calhoun. What a neat horse he is. Coming off a win in maiden company at Churchill. He owns a win over the track, and it was at 1 1/16. He draws a nice inside post position. He'll be a big price. Tight 10 has been impressive looking on the track. He's another big price for Steve Asmussen, who knows his way with 2-year-olds. Complexity. 5-2 on the morning line. Game winner coming in from the West Coast, undefeated for Bob Baffert. 8-5 and morning line favorite. And then Code of Honor. These outer post positions, I can't say are terrible posts, but it's funny. If this were the Kentucky Derby, people would be thrilled with posts 13 and 14. When it's the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, they get a little leery of it, to be sure.
Gunmetal Gray on the track now, 1 of 2 in here for Jerry Hollendorfer, who also has Dueling. Dueling's a horse I'm very interested in, was a maiden winner last time, but lost a game winner in his start prior when Dueling was actually the 4-5 favorite, and Dueling really took a big step forward in his next race. His stablemate is on the track now. We're taking a look at Gunmetal Gray, maybe a little bit of a bigger name than Dueling in that he was second in the American Pharoah in his last start, behind game winner. Ran a good race that day, got a clean trip, was 3rd wide on the turn, was all in late, and was not getting to game winner. But again, game winner is the 8-5 morning line favorite in the Juvenile.
I'm not saying that this made a difference in the outcome with game winner. I don't know that anything would have changed, but I didn't love the way Gunmetal Gray got away from the gate in the American Pharoah. I thought he had a little excuse and kind of bobbled a bit and ended up, I thought, scrambling just a little bit to try to gain position as opposed to his race at Del Mar when he broke his maiden. He broke cleanly. he was kind of into the race right away and was able to get the trip and take over the lead when he needed to and drew off from there going a mile. I thought it was a little harder for the mile and a 16th. He'll benefit from experience. He has the disadvantage now of being in post 12, and he does need a clean break, but I did think he had a tiny excuse. And the same is going to be true for some of those horses on the outside. Again, not meaning to be flippant as far as post position, but certainly you would rather be more toward the middle of the field, I think, in a race like this with a young horse versus risking losing quite a bit of critical ground in a mile and a 16th run.
There's a horse that shouldn't lose too much ground in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Talismanic drew the rail with that familiar big white blaze, Caton. Here's our defending Breeders' Cup Turf champion. And he's out there doing his thing this morning. Very popular with the racing public. He has his own fan club, and why not? He not only won the Breeders' Cup Turf last year, he went on to Hong Kong where he ran a really good second. The race in the Arc was not great. I watched the Arc. He just kind of ran around there. But obviously a horse that's very well suited to racing here in North America.
Yeah, and, I think ground is going to come into play maybe for Talismanic. And to me, a different set of circumstances coming into the Breeders' Cup as well as a very different turf course, just as far as the surface itself is concerned, how Del Mar feels underneath the horse's feet and how it plays versus how this one does. That said, this is a fun horse to watch. He is a Breeders' Cup champion. And, he is the horse that last year when I saw him the first time, it wasn't disparaging, but with that big white face, he looks like a show pony. He's got those bright white stockings. He's very flashy, very distinctive. He is not the tallest horse in the world, but he is solid, and he's stout, and he's strong, and he was a very happy horse last year leading into the race. Fanny Salmon tabbed him prior to the race as a horse that we should be watching, and she was right. And so I'm going to be listening to Fanny right before the race to find out whether this should be a time that we can bet our money again, whether we'll see a little return to form for Talismanic or not.
Full disclosure, Gabby got that like Talismanic too, and I was scrambling for a horse in my pick 4, and I threw in Talismanic because Gabby and Fanny both liked him, so I wound up hitting that pick 4, which I think was the only thing I hit last Breeders' Cup, but it was well worth it. This horse will really legitimize himself after the Breeders' Cup Turf. You'll remember Highland Reel did not have a good trip in the Breeders' Cup Turf. He wound up finishing 3rd, but Highland Reel is one of the best grass horses we've seen, over the last 5-10 years or so. Won the Breeders' Cup Turf prior, won the Hong Kong Vase in the start after that on December the 10th at Sha Tin, and Talismanic gave him all he could handle that day, running a very good second. Kind of some ups and downs this year. They tried the Dubai World Cup with this horse at one point. Now back on turf where he's much more comfortable. He did run a really good second, 2 starts back to Wallgeist, who will be one of the favorites in the Breeders' Cup Turf. The Arc, kind of an even effort, but again, fan favorite here is the Euro Brigade continues to make their appearance here. We saw several of them earlier this morning, and we've got Yiza and Princess Yiza and
Azira. Azira, I believe, is in front, and Princess Yiza in the rear, and these are different trainers, but as we talked about yesterday, you'll frequently see the Euros go out in groups and kind of simulating the way they train back at home in their yards. They would be out in a big group of horses at a time. It's keeping them company, and Talismanic is walking back behind us again, Joe. Yesterday, you guys laughed at me for taking a picture, but I'm always in awe of the close proximity to such great horses, and he's so cool to spot, too. He just walks along the outside fence. These guys are walking as well, just kind of checking out the surroundings and chilling. They are out of their stalls for a long period of time at home as opposed to the time period that our horses are out of their stalls for their morning workouts. We have daily racing at the racetracks where the horses train. So there are some time constraints on the amount of time you can spend on the racetrack or with that whole process. Our horses will be taken out to graze later. Frequently they'll be getting out of their stalls many opportunities. But as far as actual training and with a rider on their back, most of the time it's once a day in the morning for about half an hour to 45 minutes, give or take, depending on the barn. In Europe, there's a little bit more time given. There are no restrictions as to when the track is open or when they can go out, and as a result, they can take a bit more time, and they'll go for leisurely walks. So they do try to keep them as close to their program as they possibly can. Both those fillies that we saw are coming off victories. In the case of Azira, it was on yielding ground, and she does appear to be the type that likes a little give in the ground, that I think the weather forecast is working to her advantage.
Azira, the other horse that was out there, that still is out there, that was pictured just moments ago. She drew post position number 14 with Frankie Dettori. We know that Frankie obviously knows his way around a good turf horse, and the familiar leap when he wins a big race, seen several times obviously in the Breeders' Cup. She's 8-1 internationally, so Azira given a good chance in the filly and mare turf. Sister Charlie is a horse that will be representing Chad Brown, one of his 5, along with 4-star Crook. But it's Wild Illusion, who is the international favorite, 7-2 in the morning line, 5-2 internationally. And here's the likely second choice for the Breeders' Cup turf. And Able even money, I believe Wahlgeist is 5-1. Wahlgeist has a sensational resume in his own right.
Now you see Wahlgeist is very hot. You can see the lather on his neck. I believe he got a little warm yesterday, too.
He did.
Despite the chilly temperatures. He might have a winter coat yet. That might be part of it. He also might be the type of horse that just sweats a bit more, gets warm and lathered up. If that's the case, then you don't get concerned about it. If it's because of nerves, which it sure doesn't seem to be, then it would be something that you might be a little bit more concerned about from a handicapping standpoint. And, you know, Joe, many times I've seen, especially Euros, come over and in the morning, get lathered up like this every single time, and in the afternoon it doesn't happen.
Very true.
I don't know why, but there's just that routine and that comfort level later on, as far as the work is concerned, that doesn't faze them. But Wahlgeist is looking a picture of health. Ran a huge race in the Arc de Triomphe to finish 4th. He has put together a very nice string of victories in Group Stakes Company, equivalent to our graded stakes company, and he owns a win at Chantilly in Group 2 Company on soft ground at 1.5 miles. And to me, that is something that will work in his favor if the ground is really soft come race time. That's a good group of horses that he beat. He's held his own in top company, and though he wasn't able to get past Enable on firm ground in the Arc, given what we know about the Arc and what it can take out of a horse coming over here in terms of winning the Breeders' Cup, you know, maybe you do make a case for Wahlgeist as much as you do for Enable. He is right with her as far as ability is concerned, outside of the fact that she was able to beat him and has done it 2 years in a row.
Enable drew post 2, Wahlgeist drew post 12, so Enable has the advantage there. But when you go back and watch the Arc, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm taking anything away from Enable, because she is an absolute beast. But she got a great trip, Keaton. She got a great trip. Wahlgeist was held up a little bit in the stretch. I think they ran equally well that day. Enable got the jump on Wahlgeist, who did have a little bit of traffic trouble. But, you know, they'll both be on my tickets.
There's a look at Lily's Campbell. I understand Gabby has something. Gabby?
Keaton, well, Lily's Candle came onto the track, and she at first even was acting up before she even walked onto the track here by the Lucas Gap. There were a couple of horses who were making the clicking sound on the blacktop here, just being a bit keen, so that obviously she was reacting to that, but she never really settled even once she got onto the track. The rider was having a very tough time controlling her, so much so that she actually lost her company. Usually we see Europeans, they kind of travel in sets behind each other. And so she kind of was separated from her company. Luckily, we do have an outrider assistant that's now leading her, and she has settled down now, but there were a couple of scary moments. She was wheeling. She almost looked like she wanted to fall down and drop the rider, and she kind of bolted down to the inside rail as a horse was galloping towards her. So, you know, hats off to the rider today and the outrider, and, you know, taking care of the situation and protecting everybody involved. But Lily's Candle, she was a filly that was really keen and energetic yesterday, but even more so today, Caton. So that's why she's kind of been separated from her company.
And, I think we heard Fanny describe her yesterday as a bit of a diva.
Right.
But you also would like to see them start to focus at some point. And there's a difference between feeling good and being erratic. So we'll kind of keep an eye on Lily's Candle and see what happens over the coming days. Sometimes the pressure of the shipping, the difference in routine, everything changing so abruptly for a young horse is just enough to kind of put him over the edge. And you don't see as good a race effort from them as might otherwise be the case had they not left home and been in more familiar surroundings. So I think we'll know more about Lily's Candle as we watch her each day getting closer to the Breeders' Cup to see if she seems to be responding positively or she seems to be acting even worse. She's a very talented filly. She's won 3 of 5 starts, including the Prix Marcel Boussac at Longchamp last out. Huge odds that day, but she certainly showed herself and her class in that one.
Yeah, I can't say that I've watched all of her replays because I have not. But when you just look at the past performance lines, she has not been a bad actor at all in her races. She's been very professional, and she's a Group 1 winner. So like you said, you want to keep tabs on all of these horses, the horses that are training great, the horses that are maybe acting out a little bit, and you said it perfectly, Kate. We'll see how she progresses the next couple of days.
She had a lot of trouble. If you haven't seen it, try to go back and watch, if you're able, that race at Longchamp, because she didn't have an easy trip. She was way at the back of the pack. She ran into some traffic. She really had to bull her way out and find a way through to stay on and just end up with a victory by a neck. It was a pretty exciting race for the mile distance. So that's Lily's Candle for Marty Schwartz, post position 3 in the Breeders' Cup of Juvenile Fillies Turf. Back to Gabby.
Caton Will here with trainer Simon Callahan, who will be sending out Bellafina and their Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. And Simon, talk about, obviously, first and foremost, the post position. Yesterday, the Root and Riddle post position draw, she drew post 10, the widest of all. What are your thoughts of that post?
Yeah, it's a good post for her. It's out in the clear. Tactically, she can pretty much do anything. She can race or go to the lead. So we've got options, and that's a nice position to be in.
It's a funny field, and I was just making this observation to you off camera. We've got horses in this race that have won by open lengths. How do you kind of gauge this field, and how do you gauge your filly in comparison?
We're really happy the way our filly's training, but like you said, it's definitely a deep, contentious field, and a lot of them haven't raced against each other. So, we're just concerned about our filly, and she's coming into it, I think, in top form.
What have you observed from her, at least training over the track today? Have you seen any changes, or is she pretty much just staying the same, coming from the West Coast to Churchill?
Yeah, the track's pretty tight here, and she's been getting over it really well. She's really sort of adapted to the surroundings. Looks like possibly being an off-track at the weekend. That's something she's never experienced, but I don't think it should be a problem.
In terms of her running style, Simon, with that outside post position, what is the strategy with her?
Just wherever she's comfortable, whether that's on the lead or whether that's just taking a lead from 1 or 2. We've got options being out there, so it's, I think that's a nice position to be in.
You have developed so many nice horses and a relatively short career thus far. Where does she, and I know we never want to compare our children to the other successful ones, but where does she kind of stack up in all of the really nice horses that you've trained, the Grade 1 winners?
I think potentially she's one of the best for sure. We've always from day one really felt she's top class, and she's been showing it on the track, and she could be the best, but hopefully she just does the talking herself.
What shows you that? Is it just her demeanor? Is it her mental state? I mean, obviously, we see what she can do on the track in the afternoon, but what has shown you that, at least in the mornings? What is she like?
She's got so much natural speed, and she just, but she's really matured as time's gone on. We've seen such a development in her, personality, but also the way she's just conditioned and progressed, and, she's just, I think, getting better.
What is the key to kind of developing these 2-year-olds and making sure that they're the best on the biggest stage?
We just try and treat every horse individually, and with this filly, we've just seen such a progression with her. I don't really know the answer to what we do differently, but lucky to have a good filly like this.
Simon, you have a very good filly on your hands. Best of luck this coming weekend.
Great, thank you so much.
Caton?
Thank you, Gabby. Very nice filly indeed, and a very exciting race, I think, with a filly like that and the overseas threats and all the possibilities of the way the race could shape up or change based on the conditions.
For sure. She's got post 10. There's a lot of speed drawn inside of her. It'll be interesting to see how Balafino works the trip. Here's Polly Dream now. Polly Dream, trained by Freddie Head, who won this race 3 years in a row and almost the 4th year in a row with Goldakova. She lost a heartbreaker in that 4th try. She's the 5-2 international favorite, probably based on reputation of the connections as much as what she's done on the track. 5-1 in the morning line. But taking on a Breeders' Cup mile field as a 3-year-old filly, can be a tall task.
Absolutely. She was beaten a few lengths in her last race at Longchamp, October 7th. She had been away for a while, and maybe we'll be able to move forward using that as a springboard, second start back. She is a neat filly to watch here, and certainly with Freddie Head's experience with Goldakova, he's hoping he has another one the likes of her. Everyone kind of dreaming of having a horse the likes of Goldakova, to be sure. And Polly Dream's out with a couple other horses. There's a trio of horses as we look at the field for the mile. In post position order, Polly Dream drawing post of 4 in the full field. A lot of Euro influence. She's right next door to Oscar Performance, Breeders' Cup winner as a 2-year-old. Polly Dream, we're told, picking up the pace quite a bit once they've turned around and galloped a bit. It's almost a breeze. They're just, again, letting her stretch her legs and open up her airway a bit more so that you want them to at least get a good heavy breathing going, build up the cardiovascular, the respiratory as well. It'll take the edge off a little bit, too, in the days coming up to the Breeders' Cup. They're already very, very fit. Definitely racehorse fit, but if you
That's a breeze. I mean, they got to put a stopwatch on
I imagine they're going to. And this is real typical. The Euros will usually ship, have a day or two to kind of recover once they get out of quarantine. They'll do something light, and then when they have the opportunity, we'll let the horses stretch their legs through the stretch.
Look at the size of her feet. I heard you talk about the paddle foot for a turf horse. I mean, for me to be able to see this on the TV, she's got some massive hoof to her.
She does, and she seems to be well in hand at this point with this nice open gallop or breeze, switched leads there. And that's an important aspect of things that the Europeans don't always do quite on command the way the thoroughbreds here in North America do. Kind of a byproduct of the way they're trained, because they don't train in a circle where they are practicing those lead changes at each spot, and they're not as critical in their races because their races aren't run over an oval the way ours are. They're usually a variety of shapes, even sometimes straightaways. So the lead doesn't become quite as important, or there's not as much of a routine. It's kind of they switch leads when they need to.
Brandon Staubel, our clocker, has a watch on these horses, Caton. He just texted me to say he got Polly Dream 53-1 from the half. So that's really
a nice
slow
move.
Workout time.
Slow for the dirt, but actually a nice move for a European.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's what they wanted. I mean,
Black Album, French-bred colt, who will be running in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf up there as well. I'd have to say going a little bit slower than the filly we just saw, but nonetheless still stretching his legs, doing it very easily but under control. This looks to me like a 2-minute clip.
I'm sure Brandon has a watch on this one,
like how he's kind of tugging at the reins. You see his head, just his nose is kind of like giving a sign like, come on, let me do a little bit more, just a little bit more here. He does have rings on the equipment underneath his neck to kind of keep him balanced, to help the rider get a little bit of leverage, and the head carriage stays where it's supposed to with the rings as opposed to the nose getting flipped up in the air. And based on the way he was galloping right there, I can see why he would be a horse that you just rings on, because he looks like he's the type that might flip his nose up just a little bit sometimes.
Speaking of flipping around and doing her own thing, there she is, Lily's Candle, and she's again between a stronger gallop and maybe a breeze for her, but she's definitely getting something out of this. She was very energetic earlier. This is definitely good for her to stretch her legs out. I'm not sure we're going to get a watch on this one. This seems a little bit, well, I don't know, maybe we will, but she's definitely getting more than just a light gallop in here.
Now, from this vantage point, you can see that she's looking at things a little bit, too. Her ears are pricked. I think she can be a bit mischievous, not just based on what she's done before, but just based on that expression, almost looking for something to react to as opposed to just going about her business, looking straight ahead. And the rider with the right hand looks as if he's kind of urging or encouraging the filly to go about her business. She swapped over to her left lead there, kind of looking at, there was some signage on the inside fence that I think she saw, and she shifted her weight, which caused her to switch leads. As she goes into the turn, she's on the left lead, though, the correct lead, so she'll just stay there. She has a pretty way of moving on the dirt, even for a turf horse, but she does look like she can be a pistol.
Brandon Staubel texting me, and we've seen what looked to be potential breezes that were more like just strong gallops, and that's exactly what he said. Just strong gallops for the last two. Didn't even put a watch on them, but they definitely got a lot out of that. And here's the mile again. Kate and Oscar Performance is the American Hope in here, 6-1 in the morning line. Americans have won 6 of the last 7. But as far as European sports books go, the overseas prices, Oscar Performance, the only American that's getting any sort of support.
And here is maybe the star of the show, or at least the marquee. On the marquee, she's got the top billing. Enable, 2-time Arc de Triomphe winner, walking onto the racetrack. She'll compete against the boys in the Breeders' Cup Turf. She does have a presence, doesn't she? Lead pony, a couple of lads walking beside her. She looks like she towers over the pony, and the pony's not small.
Oh.
She's a little skittish there. She's just kind of reacting. A horse came up behind her, and she didn't seem to like that at all as it crossed kind of in back of her in the distance. But
she's like, don't you know who I am?
So there's a little bit of a herd mentality, too, at work. And, yeah, that's exactly what she was saying to him. Get out of my way. Just, you're in my shot. You ever worked with people like that? You're in my shot.
Exactly. Hey, I mean, and it's good. You want a horse that has a little bit of an attitude. You want a horse that has a presence about them. You want a horse that knows they're good.
Now she's just walking, taking her time, taking it all in, still on the backside, and there's a lot of people lined up to take her picture as well. Be interested to see how far the lads walk with her as we take another look at the field, the turf. I think if they got paid by the mile with their little pedometer, it would be amazing how many miles the lads rack up with the European horses as far as walking with them, because they often walk all the way to the post with them sometimes in terms of their races.
Yeah, and it can be quite a journey from the backstretch. There is a really good look. We had a better look at the pony. Now we have a better look at Enable.
She's real streamlined, isn't she? Just kind of elegant looking. A little bit longer neck and head carriage. Very high at this point, but she levels off the more she's moving.
She's got that athletic Euro look for sure. And you see those ears. We talk about it. Brandon talks about it. You talk about it, Kate, and the ears. Horses kind of talk with them. It's a sign of alertness. It's a sign of curiosity. It's a sign of happiness. But she's definitely taking everything in.
Now, they're going to walk her back in front of the things that she seems to be responding to and make sure that she gets a good look at them. And I think they're also waiting for perhaps the opportunity to get onto the turf. Maybe that they haven't opened the turf course. Typically, the track is going to wait until horses are done training on the dirt, because you can imagine, Joe, that if horses are pretty used to not seeing any horses on the turf. If they're training on the dirt course and they see a horse coming at them, it's kind of an optical illusion, but on the turf course, it can really startle them. So you try to keep the action or activity limited to one surface at a time as far as actual training is concerned. So that's kind of what we're waiting for. Enable, I think, and a few other Euros as well are just waiting for their opportunity to be able to get across over the dirt and get onto the dirt track once everybody's done on the dirt.
Fanny Salmon sending us the Euro training schedule every morning, and Abel is supposed to go to the turf right around this time with the pony and other horses we can expect to see, and there's roughly about 8 or 10 of them, include Expert Eye and Wild Illusion, two of the viable potential favorites in their respective Breeders' Cup races as well.
There's East.
Tough draw for her.
Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf.
2 for 2.
Yeah,
she drew 14.
Post 14.
I liked her. We've liked what we've seen from her the last couple mornings. she's definitely feeling good out there too. That's just a tough draw. You get a good look at East there. Perfect 2 for 2. Talking to some of my Euro friends about under the radar horses coming over from Europe. That's a name that gets bantered about quite a bit is East. But like I said, tough draw from post position number 14. There's La Pelosa for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. She's getting some respect on the international market. I believe she's in the 8 to 10 to 1 range for her race, the Juvenile Fillies Turf. La Pelosa expected to go out to the grass, as is Line of Duty, who we saw briefly in your shot. And there goes Enable. She's picking it up on the grass course. She's probably a lot more comfortable being out there. Her preferred surface, the surface that she's run on her entire career. She's like, yeah, that's more like it.
Well, they all want to run. They're born to do it, and these do it better than most.
Got away from the pony, too. We saw the horse come out on the dirt with the pony, went to the turf with the pony, and now getting a little bit of a leg stretcher here.
And we also have a group that is circling the wrong way on the outside of the turf that just jogged past us. So there's a lot of activity both back and forth in both directions here on the turf course right now. At least half a dozen horses out there, but boy, Enable is very scopy. She's just beautiful.
Cute face. I love the ears. Pointed straight up. Definitely taking everything in. Seems to be enjoying herself out there.
Very easy way, free-flowing way of moving over the turf.
Again, this is a 2-time ARC winner. The ARC winners, they've tried it 8 times before the Breeders' Cup Turf. They are 0 for 8. She looks to break through in that category, and if anyone can do it at turf, she's very well drawn as the even money favorite from post position number 2. She has tactical speed. She should be able to get a covered up trip from the inside post position.
Do you feel for the filly and mare turf, for the turf itself, for the boys, do you feel the post position really makes that much difference?
I mean, I think so. I think it makes a difference in every race. I think it's nice for her that she's drawn inside with a tactical speed because she doesn't have to try to work her way over to the rail. She's going to already be there and she's going to be covered up. And here's Wild Illusion, Kate, and filly and mare turf, the international favorite for that race, and another one of the Euro stars that's participating in this Breeders' Cup.
Wild Illusion coming in off a victory in the Prix de l'Opera. It's kind of, if you think of what the Oaks is to the Derby, the Prix de l'Opera is to the Arc de Triomphe. She beat Magic Wand. In doing so, she was notching her second consecutive Group 1 race. She won earlier in the season at August at Goodwood as well. And this year has been first or second in 4 or 5 starts. Now, she's a big filly, 3-year-old filly by DeBowie. Has a lot of size to her. So we look at the field, which includes 5 Chad Brown runners, 2 of them right on the rail, side by side. Sister Charlie toward the middle in post 6, a Raving Beauty in post 9, and Santa Monica in post 12. And we've seen a couple of the Euros already earlier today on the dirt. Wild Illusion, though, she looks bigger than most of the colts that we've seen.
She's good. And she's a 3-year-old filly. 3-year-old fillies have actually done well in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, winning about a quarter of them. The last two, in fact, as well, Wojeda and Queen's Trust. As we take a look at...
This is one of the mile contenders, One Master.
One Master for the Breeders' Cup Mile.
Coming off 2 victories for William Haggis, the most recent in Group 1 company at Longchamp. That was a 7-furlong victory. And rule of thumb, the courses, because the undulation in courses and just the way the races are configured overseas, the horses that are winning at 7 furlongs are probably just as reliable at distances of at least a mile. It's a little bit longer. They're used to running a little bit longer than we are. So when we say mile, we mean a mile. But when you hear, a horse won at 7 furlongs, I kind of always assume that they're going to be able to run at least a little bit farther than that pretty effectively.
This horse coming off a victory at 47-1 in France, 10-1 on the international markets. Well drawn on the rail is One Master.
And he's skipping along pretty nicely, she is. A 4-year-old filly by Fastnet Rock. She was bred and is owned by the Lale Stables. This is kind of a pretty way of moving on the grass as well and covers a lot of ground. This year she has didn't start really until May. She had a nice long season off. It took a little while for her to reach her best stride, but she might just be peaking coming off those back-to-back wins. She's never raced past 7 furlongs overseas.
She's going to be able to save some ground. She tends to do her best running from a little bit further back in the pack, so obviously she'll look for a ground-saving trip and hope to get some honest fractions in front of her to uncork that late run. And this is one of those under-the-radar Euros that a lot of people will be using in their Pick 5 tickets. So many great wagering opportunities both Friday and Saturday, some added Pick 5s, some daily doubles that tie up races from Future Stars Friday into Saturday. You've got a lot of big guarantees on those pools. And this is the kind of horse that a lot of people will be using, hoping that she pays $20, $25, can be a separator. It's not easy hitting the Pick 5s, even the Pick 4s on Breeders' Cup Day. But if you play them, you basically only need one to put yourself in position to make a profit over the course of the entire weekend. We've got more from Gabby.
Joe, just watching Enable walk off of the track, and it's just so funny to see how she kind of changes and her energy changes throughout the morning here. She walked onto the track just absolutely classy, and then we could see her train over the turf. Her ears were pricked. She is just the type of horse that absolutely loves what she's doing. You could just tell, even when she's walking off the track. She's just so proud of herself. Her ears are pricked. You can see just how she kind of puffs out and is proud of what she does. So I was very impressed. Obviously, this was her first day around the turf course, and I was very impressed in what we saw from her today. One thing that I observed, too, her rider seems to just try to maintain a lot of contact with her, whether it be with his legs or his hands. We saw her going around the turf course, and he was almost moving his reins a lot more than maybe what we are accustomed to here in North America, just kind of keeping her attention and keeping contact with her throughout. So you can just see a really strong relationship between rider and horse here, too. So I think it was an important day for Enable, and she definitely gets a check mark.
Some great insight. Butchero on the turf course right now for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. It is fun to see the relationships the riders have with these horses. In many instances, they have been a regular rider for that specific horse for a long period of time, and they do get to know kind of what little idiosyncrasies the horses have and what makes them tick. So it's not just about when they're galloping, but literally every step of the way, what they do. And kind of neat to hear about that contact between rider and horse. There's a lot of relationship building in the Tim Gleishaw barn with Buchero. He has his own goat. He has a team of people around that have been doing an incredible job keeping this horse happy ever since he ran, since the very beginning, but particularly since he ran in last year's Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, where he finished fourth, beaten just a length. He's already done more than any other Indiana bred in history, with earnings closing in on $1 million, and boy, does he look great.
We talk about all the great stories. This is just another one. I mean, this horse is an Indiana bred, started out on dirt, very productive career. Tim Gleishaw transferred him over to the turf. He proved himself against Open Company. He proved himself against Stakes Company. He proved himself against Graded Stakes Company. He proved himself against Breeders' Cup Company. Then he proved himself at Royal Ascot. He ran a great race there when they took him overseas. Tim gave him a little bit of time off. He ran okay in the Parks race and then came back and won at Keeneland last time out against many of the rivals that he'll face again moving forward. He's a proven commodity, and like you said, Kate, an Indiana bred, a great story. And again, the theme for Breeders' Cup, we've been talking about it for days. Good horses can come from anywhere.
Absolutely. Buchero now making his third start since traveling over to Ascot, and before that had raced 3 times in the United States this year. He started at Gulfstream Park, went to Keeneland. He ran very well on a soft turf there to finish second. Churchill, he was third in the turf sprint. He's 0 for 3 at Churchill Downs on the turf, but he's run 2 very good races, including that one. And maybe softer ground would be just enough to kind of put him over the top or get a little bit more out of it, because I do think that he is a horse that can handle any kind of surface, as opposed to some others, particularly turf sprinters, that I think tend to maybe want a little firmer type of course.
Yeah, and he drew post position number 10 with tactical speed, and we'll see how the race plays out for Buchero, who, you know, Gabby said in Abel was proud of herself, and
yeah, he's very proud of himself.
What a great personality. Buchero, much the same.
Vanna Gray moments ago, a little open gallop, tuning up for the turf sprint. Vanna Gray, a little easier to spot with that gray coat. Kind of looks like he's whipping around there, around the dogs. You see him at a nice open clip.
We'll definitely get a watch on this one.
He's still on his left lead. There he switched to the right. Ears pricked. Seems to be enjoying all the exercise and attention. Rider has a snug hold. And you can see the position of the rider's legs tell you, and body angle, that that's fast enough. Let's just stay at this pace.
Just a quarter of a mile,
exactly.
Too. Brandon Staubel just texting me saying that's what a lot of these are doing. You just saw 2 horses back-to-back there, including a Vanna Gray in front. It's a quarter of a mile blowout is what it is, and it's, you know, these Europeans coming over here and doing more than just galloping, needing a little bit more. You mentioned this was something that trainers used to do all the time, between a quarter of a mile and 3/8 moves just a couple of days out from the race. And not only did the horse work essentially a quarter of a mile, but a pretty strong gallop out here as well.
Now, on the also eligibles for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, Comedy also had a little blowout there. We'll take a look at that one. These are all happening, if not live, just a minute or so ago, with the turf course opening just about 10 or 15 minutes ago total. See, a lot happens in a short period of time. Comedy has some quick, snappy action. Left lead right now, and might not be traveling any faster than anything we've seen, but looks visually like she's traveling a little faster than some of the others, and that might be in part because of her action. Looks like she might have been right behind Havana Gray on that work as well. So it's possible that they both turned in about the same amount of the same time for that little quarter mile that they opened up. But you can see where Comedy looks like she's moving a little bit quicker. It's just an optical illusion, but something that, especially for the jockeys or the riders on board, they have to try to gauge how fast they're moving, and good horses especially can really trick you, can really fool you as to how fast they're going.
Quarter of a mile blowouts for both, and interesting that they were both allowed to gallop out all the way back to the backstretch as well. So good moves. Again, what these trainers believe their horses need. And we have a live shot here of Queen of Bermuda on the racetrack. A lot of Euros out this morning, both on the dirt and on the turf. The training session for all of the horses ends at 10 a.m. We're about 5 or 10 minutes away from that. Again, the action fast and furious. We're going to get a look at the Aidan O'Brien horses here for the first time in the coming days, currently in quarantine. Bob Baffert's horses, the vast majority of them arrived today.
Exactly.
So we should get to see them tomorrow morning. So we've seen a lot, Keaton, but we're going to see some horses that we haven't seen in the next couple of days leading up to Friday and Saturday.
Queen of Bermuda was second last out in the Criterium to Maison Lafitte at Maison Lafitte in October. That was not that long ago, October 13th. Long shot on the morning line from post position 11, but the filly by Exceed and Excel has been first or second in 7 of 10 starts lifetime. And Flavian Pratt will be aboard Queen of Bermuda. As you see her walking past to the empty stands, they won't be empty for long. No racing today or tomorrow at the Downs, but racing on Wednesday, and I imagine we'll see a number of Breeders' Cup horses schooling in the paddock on Wednesday, depending on the weather. They are calling for a little bit of rain, and definitely rain on Thursday as well. But fingers crossed that the forecasters are right, and they're pretty good in this area.
The closer we get to race days, too, the more accurate they are. And Friday, cloudy, but Saturday looks sunny. Temperatures mid-50s to 60 degrees. Queen of Bermuda, who we just saw, Kate, and we've talked about this. This horse is a 2-year-old. She's run 10 times.
Yeah, this is a little different than how we do things here, right? In fact, overseas on Arc de Triomphe Day, a 2-year-old competed against older horses. Never see that here.
How and why?
Because the conditions of the race and the purse and everything were open to it, and the 2-year-old fared pretty well. Didn't win the race, but ran very well.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Just a little difference that, again, you would never see that happening here.
No. It was Queen of Bermuda, again, just kind of taking everything in, right? So she's getting acclimated. Obviously, with the fact that she has had 10 starts in Great Britain and also in France, combination of the two, a little bit of back and forth, but she knows her way around racing. Now it's just a matter of getting her acclimated to her surroundings and different kinds of surroundings, obviously, here at Churchill Downs. But those ears are up, taking everything in, looks very alert and happy, as basically every horse we've seen has looked.
So far, so good. Fingers crossed that they all continue in the same vein. Let's take a look at the Breeders' Cup turf lineup one more time with Talismanic and Enable side by side in the starting gate. Channel Maker for Bill Mott, Robert Bruce in post 4 for Chad Brown, and so on. Brad Cox, who we touched on, will have Arklow, who is a high odds horse, but certainly horse for course. And toward the outside, we get to Sadler's High Happy, who we saw started the day, seeing that one on the track, Sadler's Joy, Valtgeist, and Hunting Horn. And Quarteto de Cordas, a Brazilian horse who qualified via winning a Breeders' Cup Challenge race, a win in your in race in Brazil, is unique. One of the first Brazilian horses we've seen in the Breeders' Cup Showcase Day under the care of Ian Wilkes. He breezed yesterday, I believe, or the day before. We saw him out on the track. And we did catch up with Ian. Here's what he had to say about Quarteto de Cordas.
Sent it home through a Singapore connection. They bought him out of Brazil and sent him to me. I've known Senate for a long time, and that's where I got him.
So how does he seem to be adjusting to his surroundings here?
Very new. I haven't had him that long, so it's been a very short time. So everything, just him getting to know my program, I'm getting to know him, still learning each other, but he's doing fine.
So I hear stories of horses from overseas that maybe aren't used to having a handler in the gate or gallop without a saddle on their back in the mornings. What is different for him here?
He's been very good. I took him to the gates. I schooled him in the gates, and he walked straight in. Didn't have a problem with the guy up beside him. That's you look at them things. You try to handle them things. Make sure you cover all your bases, and he hasn't missed a beat that way.
Are you happy with post position 9?
That's why I got a spot in the starting gate, so I'm okay.
Everybody happy once they get that position in the starting gate, and after last night's Root and Riddle post position draw, we now know who does have a start in the gate. That's One Master Schooling in the paddock. That is, he's the second horse. There he is, One Master, and the other horse, Queen of Bermuda, as they take a little spin around the paddock to just check out the surroundings. They'll be back on the track in just a moment, and we'll get to see him one last time. We still have a lot to see. Coming up tomorrow, as Joe mentioned, perhaps a look at the rest of the Baffert contingent and maybe get you caught up on some of the workers that happened elsewhere in comparison to how the horses have arrived and are training here with their maintenance moves at Churchill Downs. And a shout out to all those in that Windstar Fasig-Tipton breakfast marquee. Save us some coffee and some donuts. We're on our way.
Waffles.
We're just about done. For Gabby, Brandon, Joe, I'm Kate and Bradar. So glad you could join us for breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern here at Churchill Downs. Have a great day.